everybody doing? You're looking good.
Good, okay. We have
Good for the end, you know, we're coming to the close of the year. I know a lot of people are really busy. Including myself. Yeah, so great to see everyone. Just a few reminders and we'll do like a little recap of last session. We have a little bit of usually we do our leadership challenge towards the end of the day. We've got our speaker this morning instead to fit us in her schedule because she's a busy lady. But, so just a reminder, please do your homework assignments. I think we've kind of maybe forgotten that that's part of the class, so that is expected of everyone, and we want to see those the Monday after class. So I know it's a busy time, but remember this is part of doing the class. It helps us recap what we did at the session, gets us doing a little more critical thinking about what you all are learning. Also, if attendance is mandatory. And we've had a few folks missing. We weren't expecting some folks to be missing last session. So if you do have a conflict and you know, and some of you have talked to us and that's all good, but please let us know. You are supposed to attend. So just a reminder of that. And then also who's able to attend any water events in the past month? Couple of you. All right. Yeah. What did you go to? Where were you at?
The fall symposium for Northern Water.
How many people were there? Yeah. Any thoughts on what you heard there, or is it pretty standard? Anything surprising?
a lot of repeat information of what we had just heard.
Yeah, that was a funny coincidence of events. Any other thoughts? Yeah, I was the talk by Pat Wells, I thought was pretty interesting. Just kind of looking ahead and thinking more about, northern water supplies, keeping them in northern Colorado, and I'll be interested to hear Lisa's talk as well. Anyone attend any other water events? Yeah, what did you guys go to?
I did the South Platte round table.
Oh, the round table.
The last two.
Yeah, what's that?
It was good. I wanted to attend one of those meetings, but never, I guess, made the time for it. So I didn't really know what to expect. I know one of our board members Big Tom, the Watershed Coalition, he had taken a part of it, and our water and sewer director, so he really needs those meetings. So I knew that, but I didn't really know the content of what happened in those meetings. So that was really interesting to hear about. Basically, the roundtable was hearing proposals from different organizations all over within the basin, from like High Springs to Greeley, and yeah, it was really interesting to hear these projects that people were pitching and asking for the roundtable support to then take to CWCE. So I had no idea it was set up that way. That was really interesting.
And that was specific to like this time period because of the grant?
The grant. So that's why I didn't think I wrote this in my write-up, but I want to attend another. When you're not.
Come to the Metro Roundtable.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll look that up.
Anyone else, other events? Yeah.
Went to the South Platte River Forum in Greeley and heard a bunch of different speakers, including our state demographer and a state climatologist. And, we all know it's getting hotter and we're getting less precipitation, but he was a little ambiguous about the Front Range, where we're just not really sure if we're gonna be wetter or drier, so it goes wetter.
If it was bad, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's only, gotta be like, yeah, that's good.
How about you, Jolie?
I went to the fourth session of the Water Center water symposium events,
Yeah.
and that was great. I really liked hearing from the community center. The Community Foundation of Northern Colorado, and the more information about the Northern Colorado Water Alliance, and learning about collaboration across this whole region and how the Community Foundation is taking that role. I thought that was really interesting. And I appreciated the last session was, focused on DEI in, water. And that was, Jessica Thresher from the Colorado Water Center presented on that. That was very important. Yeah.
And Jessica will be speaking at our next session in January.
Oh, great.
So, we'll hear from her. And looking at your homework assignments, and just thinking about how we're leading into today, I thought somebody brought up, what are some successful examples of municipalities partnering with agricultural water users? And so today our session is focused on municipalities, and we're gonna look at, I think, 6 different, districts or municipalities and their water supply and demand management aspects. And then next session in January, we're gonna hear about agricultural water uses. And we'll have a talk, is anyone familiar with West Water Research? Yeah. We hear a talk from Brett Bovee, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the ATMs, the transfer methods that go between municipalities and agriculture, and talk about some of the challenges with those and where there have been successful examples and why there aren't more successful examples because there's challenges. So we'll hear more about that. Some of the other things I wanted to bring up that kind of I saw in many people's responses was just like hearing from Northern Water, seeing Chimney Hollow, and just the scope and the timeline and the scale of those projects was really eye-opening, I think, to a lot of folks. And so, thinking about like going forward, are there going to be any projects of that scale? Like, what's gonna happen with NISP? Is it gonna actually go through and is it gonna happen? And what does the future of water projects look like? And, in terms of the Colorado Water Plan, they're all in for water projects, right? Like there's a lot of funding, there's a lot of talk about building more infrastructure. So, there's kind of a tricky grayness there. So how do we make that happen with all of the different permitting and different aspects that have to go through? Somebody also mentioned, I thought was interesting, even though these bureaucratic processes take time and the whole review process is very burdensome, in the cases that we heard, it made projects seemingly have better outcomes for a lot of different users. So in the case of Terry Ranch, it was like they were initially thinking about a different project, and then they were like, oh, well, maybe Terry Ranch could work. And that's a little controversial for different reasons, but and then, in the case of the putting in I don't remember what it's called, the Poudre River, like now there's going to be more flows that are going into the Poudre River. That wasn't originally part of the project. So yeah, any thoughts about that kind of bureaucratic process and how we can use that to the benefit or to the detriment of our communities and the complexities of that? I just want to open that up for conversation. Yeah.
I think my perspective, especially from reading the book that I was assigned to, and actually deals with that mention, I've come to the opinion that it's a tool like any other tool. It's probably a very good tool, but any tool can be used for good or for harm. And so the stakeholders involved, I believe, have an obligation to try to come at it in a way that's more productive than detrimental. So making sure what you guys are doing, or positions are taken is important. But of course, people can use it to grind something down, to stop something, almost capriciously, or they can, on the other side of the occasion, use it for great good. And I think, watching some of these projects morph, and it's interesting because I had it front row with the Windy Gap project and understanding the settlement that was done on the West Slope, that actually provided $15 million to a grant, the Grant Foundation up there that parcels out grants and does work in the valley there to provide nutrient reductions and other kinds of things there. And I have a client that actually was a part of that and struggled with that, but now that you begin to see the grants, you begin to see the kind of cool work being done in the valley to make and I'm biased because I like to fish, I can do things like that, but watching what's going on in the Fraser River, the Colorado, and the bypass, you know, there's some pretty cool stuff happening too, so painful, yes, expensive, yes, but, if it's used overall in a sense that it has a motivation of good, and using the tool for good, then I think hopefully it produces something that not just for us, but for community directions, downstream of us. I just,
Other thoughts or follow up to that?
I guess I see a little bit of inequity in who can actually pursue these kind of things. I think that comes to a detriment to at least being in a smaller community. That we just don't have the resources that some of the larger communities have that are rich, like to your point, they're protecting their interests. They're making sure they have a future in water. I understand that, but I think it's such a singular lens. It doesn't go any further than that. That's really challenging to see because like water's the most challenging thing and we're all competing for the same resource.
yeah, make no mistake about it, resources do guide outcomes.
Just the timeline.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's really, really interesting. We're gonna have to go really fast through my presentation, because you guys are already at a level that you already got a lot of stuff. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think it was Jennifer or.
I did have my hand up, Amanda, but I think maybe 15 other people did too. No, I think, one thing that I realized is with these districts and then we have our, you know, especially Northern Water, okay? They will tell you over and over again, and it's a good thing that we remember that they are supplemental supply. But when that comes to your system, okay, everybody's system is a snowflake. We're all different. I'm not even kidding, down to where you're located, we're all different. However, kind of Brad's point of this exportation of our water resources, you know, I did mention we've got Castle Rock coming up in our neighborhood, and I was just saying to Ellen, I'm like, okay, we've got to figure out, you know, in town, we're trying to figure out, you know, how we can compete with Castle Rock. You know how weird that is to say?
Yeah.
You know, and we're in Southeast Weld County, like, that's so weird. But at the same time, it's a protectionary, it's a reactionary thing. But on the other hand, what we found is when we share, and sharing is caring, I'm full of them today. We have a neighbor in Port Lupton, we're redoing our IGA right now, and it's a planning IGA. But we're bringing into the fold service areas and who best can serve certain areas that we prefer be annexed into one area or the other. And I'm not even kidding you, augmentation is important. Augmentation resources are important to our water portfolio. So if we serve Port Lupton with sewer, this is gonna sound gross, we get a little augmentation from that if you think about it.
Yeah.
But sharing is
Three.
caring. Yes. Yes, very, very clean, going back and be augmenting properly for our water plant. But I think the idea is that it's hard to share unless you can find beneficial and equally beneficial kind of situations that don't really exist out there unless somehow the snowflakes collide in the middle of a blizzard and you just happen to be in the right place in the right time with the right system. And I guess my takeaway is the greater structure is kind of lacking there, you know, that greater umbrella of ensuring that. And I'm gonna go back to when I just graduated from grad school and I was like, I'm gonna save the world. But like, I do believe that, you know, at some point in time, we'll be able to say, yes, per the demographer, we'll have enough water for this many more years and we can support this much more population. That's also the scientist in me coming out. So, but I go back to that because I also struggle with what if that doesn't happen. So. Sorry, that was very.
I just was gonna say, going back to the timeframes, to me, that was one of the most maddening things to hear is, you know, I guess when you hear so many, I'll just say people in general, it doesn't matter if you're an individual or with an organization, complain about water scarcity in this area. And to hear this timeframe, I mean, I was first exposed to NISP at a rally down in Fort Lupton at that historical fork in Cerro along South Platte back in 2008, when I was working for the power utility down there. That's 15 years. If that's, and that was, and it had already been going for a while at that point. And when you hear Northern Water say that they have people on staff who, you know, basically their career is within the span of this project.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. I understand taking our time and making sure that we get things right, quote unquote. But man, when you're talking about something like this that seems to have so much more benefit to the common good, why in the world do we make it so hard? I don't understand that.
I think that probably said to several other people, but I moved out here years ago, back east, where the problem is too much water, not too little. And people here that I talk to take great pride in compact and how it works so well. I think it's gonna collapse. A compact or cooperation is great when there's enough to go around. You know, much to go around, those boards are gonna go awfully sharp. And then, you know, both lawyers and, I don't know if it's gonna come to gunfights, but I mean, it's gonna be legal fights, and the lawyers, the only ones who are gonna win are the lawyers. At $500 an hour. So I just think the compact, at some point, and by the way, at some point, the compact is going to have to be done something
You're
with.
talking about Colorado River Compact, South
Yeah,
Platte?
all of these things, because the Platte River same way, the water is short there. The New York Times has had a series of articles over the last, 3 months maybe, on water. And it points out a lot of things, and I just got an email, an article yesterday where I think the guy's name is Tim Hatton. He's 27 years old. He was the executive director of, the Imperial Valley, irrigation, area. And now he is heading up the California.
I read that too.
You read that too, yeah. And that's what's gonna happen. You have to have people who are gonna compromise on who gets what. As Brad, the water pointed out, 85% of this water in Colorado goes into agriculture. I think we shouldn't be growing certain types of crops. Arizona used to be a big cotton producer, believe it or not. Last 10 years, it stopped. Well, the cotton doesn't, the soil may be fertile, but it needs water. And you shouldn't be growing cotton in Arizona. Maybe you shouldn't grow winter lettuce in California in the desert.
One of the things we deal with a lot is just the sheer cost of these infrastructure projects. I mean, you cite Terry Range, and which, great success for Greeley. But the other side of Terry Range is they spent 10, 15 years and like $15, $20 million trying to get a permitting process and then ended up back at ground zero. And just the sheer bureaucracy and the permitting and the research and are we doing the right thing is such a cost and capital. To add on to anything. And I think to Jason's point, as we're starting to see climate change escalate and accelerate in its change, we can't project these 15, 20, 25-year projects when the need is now. By the time it's built, by the time NISP is built, are we even talking about the next NISP? Should we be talking about the next NISP?
We will talk about the next.
How many of you have heard of Two Forks?
Two forms?
Yeah, remember Two Forks?
there.
Were you there?
Yeah.
Well, sort of, but, just speaking sort of to what Nick and to Jennifer, with what you were saying though. Two Forks was a project, it's in Deckers, and it was gonna be this huge reservoir. And it was going to inundate a beautiful canyon. There's no doubt, there were some environmental impacts. It actually passed through Region 8 EPA permitting wise, and then got vetoed by EPA headquarters in DC. And, I was privileged to be at a presentation where the people from the EPA that actually had denied the permit were on a panel. And they were sort of saying, weren't we so smart? Like, we saved this beautiful canyon. And I looked around and every municipal water provider was like, you just don't get it, do you? You have to wonder where we would be today. Had Two Forks been built. Because Two Forks was not built, there are hundreds of other projects.
Yeah.
Millions and billions more money has been spent. Arguably greater environmental impacts than we realized because of that decision. So it's all about those decisions, right? It's all about those decisions that.
Well, I mean, what else did you lose out on as far as time goes also? I mean, I think, I'm gonna paraphrase here, but I heard years ago, after the 2013 floods, If NISP would have been built, those reservoirs would have been filled just off of that one weather event. And it's like, look how much we've lost now in that resource because they're not there still.
So it's so interesting, and I love this stuff, you know, I'm a real water nerd. So we always used to talk about storage in terms of a cost benefit analysis. How much do you charge a ratepayers to have a bucket that can sit empty 7 out of 10 years? But then you get those big floods. But now what we're seeing is these extreme weather events that are just like, oh my gosh, get them in the ground.
Yeah.
Right? But we used to say, well, you know, if it's only gonna fill once or twice in a decade, maybe it's not worth charging ratepayers, because we have to be cognizant of that too. And housing affordability and how that all fits.
We're having a conversation, there's so much trying to expand Halligan Reservoir, I mean, the
Yeah.
price tag is 350 million.
Oh,
And I mean, Fort Collins is fairly wealthy, we're not 350 million, you know. And then like a community like Ellen's, I mean, how can we possibly have any equitable solutions for that? Because the price tag is so stinking huge and only going up. How do we solve that?
Well, so I haven't had. You said, Jennifer, you said that you're competing with Castle Rock's one of my members. So South Metro's got 14 members and Castle Rock and Parker one, but we can talk about that too.
The price of water.
What's that?
Our board has a policy of, buy water at a reasonable cost, whatever it comes up. And last night I pointed out, I said, maybe we need to consider what's reasonable. Maybe something comes up and it's more expensive, but if you don't have it 10 years from now, you'd say, my God, why the hell didn't we buy it next year?
So it's the monopoly theory,
And that's
right?
the point.
You're on it, you buy it, you got it.
You can't predict, you can predict when you want to buy a new car, you can say 15 years and the expenses reach so much. We can predict infrastructure replacement and plan for that. You can't plan for water, you gotta have a good war chest. So when something comes up, you move.
I like the fact you call it a war.
And then-
Well, so there was a decision in the water courts called the Pagosa decision, and it says that people have to use when you're going to water court to change water, so it's all gets into speculation, right? So if I had money, you know, you could have made a mint, right, if you had bought water rights, but the court actually has imposed some restrictions on sort of the money grab of water, right? Because you have to be able to show demand and need in order to get that through.
Just shows that propaganda is powerful, you know, save the food, right? I wanna save the food, I don't think there's any reason to follow.
That's the best advertising campaign ever.
That's not-
Sell that little one. Oh, yeah.
But like, wait, if
The name.
this is built, there's actually gonna be a minimum flow, you know, like, I think the biggest threat to the food, at least to Fort Collins, is probably, it's here, you know, head gates, you know, down, it drops like this, fish, that water heats up like this, so I think like, putting a minimum flow is probably the single one thing that we could do to actually help that river, but yet save the fooders is they're abusing the system, in my opinion, and if people wanna disagree, that's okay, but the new land use code in Fort Collins, I'm on the P and Z, like, all these signatures, if anyone here signed it, you're subject to lots and lots and lots of propaganda, so I'm kind of that right now, so. So how do we combat that or rebuttal to that? I know it's been used for, you know, millennia, right?
Right, well, and that's the difficult thing, and you know, it sounds like you've gone through some water court stuff, so we won't spend too much time on that, but you know, there's 3 beneficial uses in the Constitution of Colorado. That's municipal, industrial, and agricultural, and it doesn't reflect any changing value in your community. You know, pictorial, environmental, recreational, right? But what we're seeing is this shift of values that are changing, and that's when you get these efforts, you know, because people just become so passionate. But yeah, when we get down to the basics of it, it really is about projects like this, you know, making supplies available for people. Because rooftops are jobs, right? And how many of you are like part of either work at a municipality or an elected in a municipality? I mean, does anybody want to say like, we don't want to ever grow again, not their house? Because homes represent jobs and those are those rooftops, and that brings in, so you get these competing interest, because people really struggle with just saying, okay, well, so now I guess we're just done.
I would argue there's one city council member that may have that opinion.
So, but it's interesting, especially when you look at, there's nobody. My eyes are getting so bad anymore, I'm like struggling, I can see your name, so I feel like I'm in an eye exam. But Aurora is an excellent example. You know, city councils typically are not partisan, right? But you look at the council and you can definitely tell, right? Who's who and what's what and what drives that. But if you look at the city of Aurora, their service areas, I think, and we'll talk a little bit about them, but I think they're like at 50% built out.
Yeah.
So where's it gonna come from? Where in the world is it gonna come from? And they're my brother, I mean, I almost worked 20 years at Aurora. So I'm absolutely not slamming that, but I think that creates, water should not be political in my personal opinion. Yeah, but of course it is.
But I think that's totally, I don't know, we'll talk about it on our stuff. But given the world we're in today, and it shouldn't be that way, but that's what I feel like it is. So everything becomes about that. And I don't think a council person should, one council person shouldn't be able to drive an agenda for everything that goes, or the same thing, you talk about the NIST thing with somebody in the EPA in Washington DC just made the decision for, how much that affects them. And they have no idea what is even here. They have no clue that maybe they've never even been to that area, but in their head, this is what it is. I think the further out you get, the further that people get from the actual project, the less there's understanding of it and decisions being made. They're not making the decisions for what is best here. They're just doing what they think is, and a lot of times I feel it's just what I'm gonna say I'm doing this, and I can say I did that. Well, that doesn't help the 500,000 people that are in that area being serviced by that. And so as just I'm not in the municipalities of all that, but that is just a citizen, it makes me crazy. And
Yeah, I used to work, in the Colorado River Delta region in Mexico, and we were involved in negotiations to get water for the environment for the Delta in Mexico out of the Colorado River, which you imagine
How did that go for you?
might be a difficult thing to do. But we did it, and, with changes in administration, one of the things that was so successful about our ability to negotiate was that we worked with people who were in the region. We had the same partners, the 7 states, the 2 states in Mexico, and people knew each other and they knew the interests and the needs, and we were able to work together and meet those. And there was a great worry, with changes in administration, that people would pick it up and say, no, this is not happening, just start mucking around in the business of the Colorado River negotiations. And so everybody just kind of put their heads down and kind of did what they did. But I think the Colorado River negotiations in particular, like, they are very aware that they do not, those negotiations need to be outside of the red-blue politics of our nation. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to do so. And I think we're seeing that everywhere now in municipalities and counties and states, and it's just, and Jenny Arndt kind of talked about some of those difficulties, but yeah. Okay, but I think we need to.
True words never spoken, and I'll just tell you this really quick. An old friend that worked at Denver Water said something was going on in Washington. EPA said that they were gonna fly out. And he said it was this bluebird sky day. He said we were all in vans, and all of these Washington DC EPA people stumbled out of the van and looked up the valley and went, oh my gosh. And he said at that exact moment, I knew we were effed. I was like,
Why did you go with this
two doors? He was like, I couldn't figure out how to get them back in the van or make it rain or something. And he said the moment he saw them seeing this environment that they had never seen and had no, and they made that decision.
But they dropped in for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
You came in, we dropped you in, and now you're out. And not to come back, maybe to never come back, and not to live here, not to be here, and. I do get irritated about that, just because I just don't, just as, I shouldn't make a decision for somebody in Vermont that I'll never be there, I won't be there, that time of thing, I just don't feel that that's. It just, and again, that's where compromise comes in, but.
I think, Nick, you said something about like, well, you can't, like, you have to build this infrastructure, but it doesn't just appear, right? I mean, you need the capital to build it, but it takes years and years and years to build it. And the EPA guy said, we denied it because no one could show us that they were going to need it. And it was like right then, it's like, well, we didn't need it right then.
Yeah.
So I think it can be a really frustrating, but it can be challenging, but I tell you what, it's a lot of fun. I know it's like, I don't know if you guys probably would pick that up, but anyway.
Okay, well, let me do a brief introduction.
Oh, I see, you don't,
Okay.
I can't introduce myself.
Tell us all about you, and then we'll get into your presentation, because I want to make sure we have enough time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So my name is Lisa Darling. I'm the Executive Director of the South Metro Water Supply Authority. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Like I said, I was at Aurora for about 20 years. And there's just so much of what you're talking about, it actually has happened and is being planned, that it's really exciting to hear people excited about the same sort of things. So we'll just go ahead and get started. And it sounds like, I don't know exactly what your syllabus has been and exactly what you've been looking at and talking about. So we'll pass through it really fast, because we don't need to belabor, talk about things too much. So, okay, I was gonna say, I'm looking at it on my screen, and it's like, hey, just hit it like that.
You'll have to aim it
Yeah.
towards that computer.
There you go. All right. So who can tell me why this is important?
The first settlers, first people in Colorado.
Well, so gold, so what is that a still from? I mean, so you recognize Humphrey Bogart, right? Come on, it's right there. Next guy, come on. Yep. So that's a still from The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which is a great old movie. It's like, if you guys seen Chinatown? There's like a lot of classic water movies, but Treasure of the Sierra Madre was really about water. So people would come from the East Coast and they would sell everything, and they'd have a donkey and they'd set up their gold mining, right? And they had this whole process that they had set up. Then somebody would come 2 years later, go upstream and use their water. So California and the gold rush was actually the first to take up the prior appropriation doctrine. Which nobody in Colorado likes to say.
You and John Tracy on the same.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So, but if you look at Colorado, so I think it's Coffin versus Left Hand, you guys probably are familiar with that. So that was the case that went to the Colorado Supreme Court, and I think it was in 1868, and the whole idea was that there were fisticuffs, up in Left Hand, because people were blowing up other people's diversions because they felt like they were taking their water. And that's when the court actually recognized prior appropriation, but that's where you get stuck with those three values, right? The municipal, industrial, and agricultural, which is actually really kind of hogtied us in a lot of ways. Because it's like, I guess anything else in today's crazy world, just should society shift as values are shifting, right? Or should you just stick to the constitutional law that we have now? And you'll hear a lot of people say prior appropriation is it, and we need to support that. But that's when you get to these compact renegotiations, right? The whole idea behind the Colorado Compact was that the 7 states came together and California had the senior rights on the Colorado. But yet they all sat down at the table and they agreed that they would do the apportionment according to the compact and wouldn't actually use prior appropriation. They wouldn't use those senior rights. And now the river's kind of gone to hell in a handbasket, and all of a sudden California has just remembered that they have the senior rights. And that's why they've got the most political clout in DC. So then, it just gets really super complicated, but anyway, so that's. And if anybody has any questions or I love your conversations, I love your dialogue. So let's just have a conversation. So first in time, first in right. So the water court, the 7 divisional courts, so Greeley is Division 1. And in the olden days, we're back in the olden days, the judge actually used to go by horseback and do decrees. And so you have an appropriation date, that's the date you filed, and then you have an adjudication date, and that was the date that you actually received the right in court. So if you look at the records, and I love history, you look at the records, you'll see everybody filed, at different times. But then the adjudication, everybody has the same date, and that's because the judge would come in on horseback and go, you all get cars. And so everybody's dates the exact same, right? And so they use appropriation and adjudication. Have you looked at, many of you probably have looked at the priority system in Colorado? You can go online and you can actually see who is first and who is second and who is third. And I'm not sure very many people realize that on a day-to-day basis, there's someone making a decision that based on the stream flow that's actually in the river, who gets wet. I mean, that's actually somebody's job, which I think is just amazing. And now the priority just on the plat is, hundreds of pages long of people who have actually got those appropriations and those adjudications, right? So those are just water terms. Okay, so Aurora, it's really interesting. So 1891 was when Aurora was first formed, and it was actually settled by a guy, I think he was from Chicago, named Don Fletcher. And he actually, this is the story, and I need to check this history, but apparently he tried to collect a fee to develop a water system for Aurora and then absconded with the money. But he ended up being like, an outstanding citizen of like Cripple Creek or something. So much later. So Fletcher renamed itself Aurora. Actually, that's when the name changed. It was when Fletcher left and hightailed it to Cripple Creek. And what happened was Aurora relied upon their brethren to the west, Denver. Denver had the oldest system, Denver's like the kingpin in the state when it comes to water. And so Aurora said, well, Denver's gonna go ahead and they're gonna supply us, and so we're fine. But what happened was, in the 50s, this is 1950, this is actually like somebody did this map, and they were actually, I wish it was colored because there was a blue line and a brown line, and the brown line was for sewer, and the blue line was for water. And somebody drew this and said, see, it says limits of economical utility service. So they said, if you're outside of this line, we're not gonna serve you anymore. And and 3/4 of Aurora was outside of these lines. So this is the 1950s. So 2 things happened in the 1950s, and we see it repeat in history. It was the growth of neighborhoods. So that's when, so I'm a 1961 baby, but the 1950s was like when all of the neighborhoods were starting to get developed across the country, right? And that was this huge idea of having these communities, with homes close together. That's when density was first being talked about. But the other thing that happened in the 1950s was what?
Elvis.
Well, yes, so I'm not talking about great impact, that's very impactful. It was what was considered before 2002, it was the worst drought. So I think Denver just saw the writing on the wall, they weren't stupid, and they said, no more. So no more outside, and this is actually, I think, at the Colorado History Museum, if you ever wanted to see the map. So what happened is Aurora in the 50s had to start developing a water system. And if you think about that, in terms of that seniority and priority, that meant that Aurora is a really, really young system, right? In terms of it being on that list. But I thought that the council showed really great foresight. They said, 3 things. First of all, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. We don't want you just in the flat. Go into the other basins, which causes its own problems. The second thing they said was, we don't want you to rely on renewable resources, which I thought was pretty insightful, especially when you look at the South Metro area and their reliance on non-tributary groundwater. But the third thing they said was design a system that can withstand the design drought. That's what we used to call it. So you design around a drought, and so you're probably familiar. So what you look at water is the dry year yield or the firm yield. What's actually odd now is that firm yield is changing and it's getting lower. which is a different in terms of valuation and market, I think is really interesting. But at the time, Aurora said, just go make sure that the system could withstand the design drought of the 50s. So that's what they did. So Homestake, which is up near the Holy Cross Wilderness, this was a shared project between Aurora and Colorado Springs. So this is one of the first projects that they started to develop. I love this map because it makes Aurora looks like it's the whole northeast corner of the state. But so what they did was they had water in the Arkansas, and this, I always do this, like look at it in my face, which I think is wrong. Okay, so what it does. So you guys know exchanges, what an exchange is, where you use the river and you kind of just trade it all the way up. So there's not physical infrastructure, you're just using the system, right, to create it. So what they did was they bought water rights down in the Arkansas, and then they exchanged it up through Pueblo, up to Twin Lakes, which is a pretty far distance, but they managed to get that taken care of. Then they did the Colorado River Basin, so they had the 25% of their portfolios here, 25% of their portfolios here. So they get it to the Otero pump station, which is up in BV and Buena Vista, and you can barely see it, but it's up on the hill. And so they take the water up and over, and then they drop it into the flat. And then it moves through the river, right, until it hits Rampart Reservoir. So it goes until it hits Strontia. Aurora's got some space in Strontia Springs, which is Denver's. And then from then on, it's piped. But before that, it's all the river, right? So somebody had to come up with this, which I just think is absolutely just amazing to me. All right, so this is a timeline. This is actually a court exhibit. But this is what they were saying. So this is the timeline of our water acquisitions. And so this is what they were saying. So you can see it started in 1954, which is, like I said, that's like 5 years before I was born. So here's what happened. So you guys look at supply and demand, and you all probably have seen these kind of graphs. So when there's snow, like when you have runoff, water goes into storage, then the runoff stops and then you start using it. Then it snows and it runs off, it goes up and down. So this is a really typical kind of graph, but this is the total amount of storage that Aurora was building in those acquisitions, right? And so this was, runoff, use it, runoff, use it, runoff, runoff, use it, and then it kind of goes back. So you can see, look at up here. So this is like in the early 2000s, we were actually pretty close to full. And I was here then, so this was like really scary. See. This was March of 2003. And we, to this day, and I don't know if this has changed since I've left, but to this day, we did a post-mortem analysis. No one could figure out how this happened. Because look how full we were. So it was a combination of dryness, extreme dryness, right? Combined with, I guess we would call poor storage management, because that's a tool and you gotta use it right. If 2002, 2003 had repeated, Aurora would have run out of water. And at this point, we were having conversations about what was gonna go first. So what do you think everybody said was gonna go first?
Agriculture.
So water inside.
Golf course. It was definitely gonna be golf courses, but then we were also having these conversations about, if we take away people's ability to water their lawns. And we all live in a high plains desert, so should we not understand that? Like, you paint your house every 20 or 30 years. Maybe you have to replace your yard every 20 or 30 years. That's where you live. But we were having conversations about how to trees alive and whether or not it was appropriate to water public spaces. So people had a place to go. So we're gonna kill your backyard, but at least we're gonna still give you play fields that you can go to. So we were having this horrible conversation. And yeah, it was a very tense time. My son was born in 2002, so I don't remember this kind of being a blur. This whole thing was just a blur. But so this is what it looked like. So this was Homestake. I showed you the dam. That's what it looked like in 2002, 2003. This is the plat up near Fairplay. That's what it looked like. So I mean, I mean, and I know many of you are probably here, the account is very dystopian. It's like the world was coming to an end or something. So what we did was we conducted, and this is to your point, sir, that I think you made, we did a really comprehensive integrated resource plan within 6 months. So you have to move fast, people find a way to move fast. Isn't that amazing? So we were looking at, we had 50 projects on, it was in all 3 basins. This was the range of the projects that we were looking at for the yield. And this was the first time conservation, we had, the first time Aurora had a conservation plan that was written down was in 2003, 20 years ago. Before that, it was children's education and a festival. That was basically it. And so this is why, you know, we don't say like, oh, we thought that, but it became demand management. That's when that concept came in. So this is what we came up with. We're talking about expensive projects. This is a $680 million project. So this is the Prairie Waters project. So basically what it does is what we realized. So have you guys discussed, you probably know about reusable water and non-reusable water, right? Which is different than renewable and non-renewable, although there is a little bit of an interaction. What we realized is that we were recapturing the water that was legally ours. So that meant you didn't have to go buy water. So what we did was we started to pump out of the river. So it was augmentation water, right? So you're using alluvial wells to pump out of the river, goes through 32 miles of pipe, 3 pump stations, until it makes its way back to Aurora, where we built like a state-of-the-art purification system. And so this actually was built and online probably within a decade, which is pretty incredible, right? And so there's much more of the story, of course, than that. So this is why it was the right, and you guys can have this presentation, and if you have any questions, please certainly ask. But it was using the water rights already owned. They used natural filtration and the alluvium and that really actually pulls out probably 95% of what you need to pull out. If you drive, this is in Brighton, so it comes out of the wastewater treatment plant, which I think it's called Metro Recovery now. When I worked there, it was Metro Wastewater, but now it's called Metro Recovery. The water leaves there, and that's over by the Riverside Cemetery, kind of North Denver. Travels down to Brighton, that's where that first pump station is. If you were there, if you drive there, you cannot see it. There's a huge freaking project and you cannot see it. The environmental footprint of it, and the environmental impact is just minimal. And it was just really cost effective because we weren't having to go buy more water, which is so expensive, right? So then what happened in our story? So if it had happened again, 2002, 2003. So what happened in 2003? No. That's a much younger puppy. And that's my daughter Claire, who's now graduating from college. We got 6 feet of snow on St. Patrick's Day in 2003. And no, so she lived. It's like a bearing curse. She did. But that was the start of the recovery. Isn't that crazy? So we went from the world is falling apart to picking up the pieces and seeing how we can recover. People got the senior systems recover much faster. Aurora was not in that position, so they struggled a little bit more to get those storage levels back up. But it did eventually happen. All right, so let's turn to South Metro. So South Metro, we're 14 members, so I need to fix that. We actually serve about 350,000 people now. And it's 80% of Douglas County and about 10% of Arapahoe County in the 14 providers that are covered. And if you look at the Front Range, the metro area, the Denver Front Range, it's places like Castle Rock, Parker. Perhaps you've heard of Rangeview, Dominion, East Cherokee Valley, Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater, and then about a handful, dozen, 6 to 8 special districts, small connectors that cover that area. So what happened with Two Forks? So we talked about Two Forks. That Denver and Aurora, the bigger providers, like you were saying, people who are bigger and better, have money and resources, they all went on their merry way and they had a backup plan. Douglas County did not. And Douglas County was really made up of just very small communities with very few resources. And they had all built out a non-tributary water. To the point where when Two Forks went away, they said, well, I guess non-tributary groundwater is it. Which was not a good decision because you can see what was happening to the aquifer. Douglas County was the fastest growing county, I think, in the country in the 80s and early 90s. And this is how they were developing. In fact, that's what you had to show to get a plat through Douglas County. You had to show them how much groundwater you thought you had, and they were approving permits. And Elbert County is doing it now. They're giving out 5-acre plots like nobody's business.
You mentioned about the wealthier areas.
Uh-huh.
Basically, because they're wealthier, they can buy more water faster, which what I call inequality as income go, you know, for Jeff Bezos to spend more money than I can, and the money tends to be shifting from the middle class to the upper class.
Right.
Same thing with water.
It is, and this was kind of interesting because, and I'm sorry, Ellen, it's like what Ellen was saying, nobody had staff. So at this point, Douglas County was bringing in, like, if you look at the S&P 500, Douglas County had more of those industries moving into that area. The money was there, but nobody had water, people. So they weren't buying more water. And in fact, that was one of the issues, is that they weren't at the table. They just kept mining the groundwater. And so, but what happens, of course, it's just like, what are those things at Wendy's? They're not milkshakes.
Frosty.
Frosty. Where you have to, like, if you have to try to like suck those through a straw, how hard it is. That's what was happening. So everybody was like dropped their little set. It's like, I'm not an engineer, you can probably tell. And they were dropping their straws in and everybody was having to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's about a $2 million investment to drill a new well now at that depth. So what happened was Denver panicked. I love saying that. It's like I feel like I have a community. Denver panicked because what did they think was everybody knew it was a problem. And what do you think Denver thought? My God, they're gonna come to us again. And they're gonna say, okay, well, you have to help these people. So there was actually reports starting probably earlier than the late 90s, but this was some of the reports that was done. This was a South Metro Water Supply study. And if you look, it was prepared for the South Metro Water Supply Study Board. So that was Denver Water, the state. There's all sorts of people that were involved in this. This was some of the headlines. And for those of you who remember the Rocky Mountain News. So this was what they were saying. And I actually got calls at Aurora from banks, asking if they should be giving people mortgages. Because if the water ran out, like what would happen to this home? And I was like, you know, I just go like, oh, it's a bad connection. Like, I mean, how much pain is that they were finding a water resource analyst, which is what I was at the time, and asking me those kind of questions. But this is like nowhere close. That's not 5 times that now. To fix that, right? Romer actually suggested that we had to put signs for people who didn't have enough water. So things were getting a little crazy. So that's what South Metro Supply, we're gonna be 20 years old next year. But it was basically the first regional efforts to get those people together. It was using money together because we didn't have enough money. And then we wanted to reuse our water and conserve. And so that's why we were formed. It's like not a picture of me. So we will never be 100% renewable. Does anybody know why? After I told you that horrible story about the wells.
Probably because you gotta pass it on downstream.
Well, there is the priority system, so you do have to do that. But the non-tributary groundwater, it's cheap and it's good quality. You barely have to touch it when it comes out of the ground. And so what will happen is, what we decided is we were gonna move to these renewable water resources, but it's called conjunctive use. You always are gonna have 10 or 15% of your water portfolio will be those non-tributary wells. And if the aquifer can be managed and through aquifer storage and recovery projects like Cary Ranch, basically, you know, what you're doing is injecting it into the ground. We can maintain those aquifer levels so they can be a drought supply. So now, especially with climate change, that's become really important, because if your surface supplies disappear, your non-tributary groundwater is not. Right, so it will always be there. We are actually below, the region average is 120, so GPCD, if you use, so GPCD is gallons per capita per day, but everybody uses a different calculus to calculate that, and so people are moving away from that, but the water plan still has that as a tenet. But in fact, our single family residents below 100 gallon. What drives this is commercial. The commercial accounts are probably what drives this. There's, you know, they're all on automated sprinklers and they don't really care. Right, so it's still high, but we are actually below the Colorado water plan goal of GPCD. We're already well below it, and a lot of your communities are, a lot of you are. It's an interesting conversation with the West Slope. The West Slope does not like to have conversations about conservation. They feel like the onus should be on us, the target should be on us. So generally statewide applicability of conservation standards hasn't gone well. I think there's more of a, not a cowboy attitude, what do you call that? Yeah, well, like they're the Wild West, or they're the frontier, right? But we're the water sucking front range. So that, it's just an interesting conversation. Oh, wait, can you, so this, oh, wait, so what I'll do is I'm gonna play this video. This is about a project called WISE, right? So we'll play the video and then we can talk a little bit about it. But can you go back to the, or can I go back to? There we go. There we go.
Miles from the mountains, there's a new water partnership flowing on the prairie.
This is big. It's very impressive, and we think it's the wave of the future.
The partnership is a collaborative approach to share and reuse mountain water.
You take a shower, that water runs down the drain. Where does it go? It goes for water treatment and put back into the South Platte River, where it can be recaptured and reused.
The innovative water plan is called WISE.
WISE stands for Water Infrastructure and Supply Efficiency. It's a creative way of making more efficient use of existing water supplies and infrastructure.
WISE is a regional partnership between Denver Water, Aurora Water, and 10 utilities from the South Metro Water Supply Authority in Arapahoe and Douglas counties. Here's how WISE works. Denver and Aurora Water use rivers and streams to bring water down from the mountains. After customers use the water in their homes, it goes to a wastewater treatment facility, but the water doesn't meet drinking water standards yet. The treated water goes back into the South Platte River and flows downstream from Denver. Water heads north on the South Platte toward Brighton, where it's recaptured and filtered naturally at the Prairie Waters Complex owned by Aurora Water. The water gets turned around and pumped through a pipeline 34 miles to the Binney Water Purification Facility next to Aurora Reservoir.
The water that we're providing is highly treated, meets or exceeds all drinking water standards. It's highest quality water we can provide.
Drinking water leaves the Binney plant and flows to homes and businesses in the WISE service area.
We can do this water loop basically forever and keep bringing it back through the system until it's finally used to exhaustion.
Aurora Water built the Prairie Water system in response to the drought of 2002 and to meet water demand for the city's growing population. The WISE agreement lets Denver Water share Prairie Water's pipes and treatment facilities.
Denver Water and Aurora Water have water rights that can be used over and over again. It's called reusable water. Denver has rights to this reusable water, but has no way to get it back up into the Denver metro area. Through the use of WISE infrastructure, Denver Water now has access to a new water supply that it can use during times of drought.
During non-drought years, Denver and Aurora Water occasionally have reusable water available to sell to South Metro Wise members. Those utilities have relied heavily on drilling rigs to tap into an underground aquifer. But with rapid growth in the region, water in the aquifer is drying up.
This water sharing agreement actually gives to our South Metro members in the WISE partnership. As a goal, we had to move towards sustainable water resources, and WISE meets that challenge head on and takes us a long way towards a sustainable water future.
WISE benefits Aurora Water by helping offset the cost of its prairie water system. The partnership also helps protect water on the west slope.
One of the great benefits of the WISE project is that it recycles our water supplies. So that way we don't have to take more water out of our streams and rivers, so we can meet more demands with the same volume of water.
WISE will provide a reliable and sustainable water supply for more than 2 million people in the metro area.
It's so critical when you're choosing a home, when you're raising your children, that you know that your quality of life will never be impacted by a lack of safe, clean drinking water, and WISE gives us that.
Water is scarce in the West, and we have to make sure that we're making the best use of every drop of water that we have. That's what the WISE project does.
Okay, so a couple of things. Those guys got filmed next to the streams. I was in the smoking area of my little next stream. When we were deciding what to call WISE. Now, keep in mind, I was at Aurora. And so you have to be careful when you negotiate agreement and then you trade places. That was a cautionary tale. But I had to laugh because I was one of the only women that was involved. And when they said, I know, let's call it WISE, it stands for this water infrastructure. I said, well, I'm pretty sure women in science and engineering have already copyrighted that. And I'm going, what's that? No, it's not. Then one of them said, even with the capitals? Oh, capitals? I said, yeah, sure. Anyway, so we were talking about Two Forks was dead. We needed a plan for sustainable water supplies, right? So WISE was one of the first projects that we did that kind of moved us towards that. But there's a couple of things. So, it uses Denver and Aurora when available supplies. It uses their infrastructure and it makes this delivery. South Metro had to invest about $150 million to this system. This is the key. So Aurora pays, $700 million for a project that the next, literally, as soon as it was in the ground, it wasn't needed. Right? Think about the floods in 13, the reservoirs had all recovered. And so now they had this huge capital that they had to regain, right? Denver has water going downstream, and as Dave said in the video, that they can recapture. So they needed prairie waters too. And then we could get it, this is perpetual. So this is a permanent arrangement, 100,000 acre feet over a 10-year block, which is pretty incredible and went a long way to us meeting our sustainable water goals. And really, if you think about it, so there's over 2 million people who are actually impacted by WISE. It wasn't court driven. It wasn't a stipulation. It wasn't a settlement. It actually, people came together because we really had a need. And it just happened to work out that way, right? This is why it works. So in wet years, the green is all South Metro. And basically this is Aurora and they're not touching their system. And they don't need to use prairie. Prairie is a very, very expensive system to operate. In a normal year, Aurora may start to move a little, so you can see this with the summer months. They may start to move a little to their project. In a not dry, non-emergency year, so in other words, getting closer to a drought declaration, you can see that Aurora practically is completely back into their own project, which is appropriate, right? They can turn us off for up to 24 months. So South Metro can get nothing in the agreement for 24 months, as long as that 10-year block is met. And then this is what happens if Denver would come in and use it. And so you can see, we barely appear kind of on those edges. So that's not how it works. I mean, it's actually, it was pretty brilliant when we looked at it being operational. So this agreement was signed in 2013 and it's still not fully operational. So to your point, it's like glacial. stunning how slowly this moves. And that's for a lot of different reasons. So these are some of the similar collaborations, and I know many of you are familiar with the Metro District's Southern Nevada Authority. Everybody's kind of in this different place, but everybody asked, what's next? So the drought happened, WISE happened, and a bunch of people came together, and it was the executive committees of the roundtables. That's how it started. And they would all get together with these little coffee clutches, and they say, like, if we took off our hats and we just tried to figure out, is there another why? So think of the loop. Is there a way that we could actually operate our water systems like that, where it's just more efficient? And that's what SPROG is. It really does stand for South Platte Regional Opportunities Water Group, which is the worst acronym in the world. But this is basically when we're talking about what's next after this. This is kind of the thinking that's going on right now. So here's what we know. We have expected to grow to 6 billion. This is all the dire things. These are the scenarios that the water plan uses for growth. I think the hot fast growth is my favorite. This one. But it's the real dire one. But the gap is entirely in the Platte. If you look at it, it's in the other basins, but the majority of it is here. It's here and it's us, right? So it's pretty scary. So this is, so you can see, so WISE was signed here. That was the first implementation plan for the water plan. This was the first water plan that was happening. The legislature said, go look at storage sites on the Platte. So we did. And we looked at surface and aquifer storage. And this group had been meeting, right? We started doing a task force. There was 120 people on the task force, and many of the people in your communities were on it that heard about this idea. We did a feasibility study that was actually supported by a state grant. So this is kind of that same idea. So you're starting to see the loops, right? So now we've got this other loop that's done that can kind of go. So you use storage. This is kind of this I-25 demand gateway is those in your communities, right? So you use that, then you have, you use exchanges, you have other storage, and then you start using pipelines that bring things back and then start moving that back and forth. So one of the differences is SPROG actually said, we need a value statement for what this is and is not. So this is what it is. It'll advance our implementation plans. The goal was to do a project that could at least create 50,000 acre feet of water. That's a lot of water when the low hanging fruit's gone. This is gone, right? It's intended to partner with ag. And it also was the environmental and recreational needs that has not been left off that table. It also is advancing these alternative water transfer methods with agriculture, where we can balance who gets the water when, different sources of water, maximizing in-use basin supplies, and water quality is to enhance because it gets pretty bad in the lower river. It's mostly Green River that we're letting go to Nebraska now. This is recharge credits, some reuse. At the beginning, Denver Basin water, when we were talking about that conjunctive use of non-tributary groundwater, that was actually included in it too. Here's what it's not. People who were developing this got really nervous that someone was going to say, instead of this, go do this. That is not the intent. So this is in addition to this, right? It's not intended to allow for permanent dry up of ag land. Although you had a really good point about changing patterns, which really hasn't been addressed so much, but it's not intended to promote fly and try. And then it's not to store trans mountain supplies. That got thrown in. So has anybody read the water? I didn't mean to say actually read the water plan. I honestly haven't read the entire water plan. Has anybody actually taken a look at the water plan though? Have you taken a look at the 2015 versus the 2023? Well, the 2023 is much shorter.
Okay.
It's a little bit more direct, actually has some actions in it. Yes, did you have?
In each of those three bullets is not intended as used. That's not mandatory, you can't use it. There seems to be a loophole, and if something goes bad, you can. Intentions are one
Have
thing.
you been in the room? So here's one of, well, there's a lot of concerns here, but I will just say, if you look at the 2015 water plan, there's a thing called a conceptual framework. And it's only like 3 pages long. But basically what it says, and it was very influenced by the West Slope at the time. The West Slope said, this thing is gonna list all the things that you have to do before you ever come and even look at me cross-eyed. And it basically said, you know, depending on your mood, it's either get your house in order or get your shit together. That's what the conceptual framework says. If we can't on the plat, if we can't do this, there will never be another project. They just won't. So is it imperative that something like this happen? Is something like this needed? Yes, yes. What did Nick say? There's not enough money. So what's happening now, even though this has got the involvement of some of the biggest water providers in the state, until we get this set up, people are gonna keep buying and drawing water. And the prices are gonna keep going up. And the whole presumption for SPROG is that it actually is people working together. It's that whole cooperative thing. I can tell you, there are communities here, not here, let's say here, like in the world, right? Who will say, I'm a NIST participant and I'm cashed out. That was like a great idea. How many $1 billion projects can you withstand? God bless you. That's the biggest hurdle to SPROG.
What is the price tag on the project?
It's right now, it's looking like it's gonna be over $1 billion.
And the timeline, if it was to be funded?
At the time, like, because a lot of it is actually just sort of a re-administration of what exists. Arguably, it could be done faster or it could be phased. It's a phaseable project. I actually sent you another PowerPoint. So there's a few slides. There's another project. So this is kind of where we were. It was completed in early 2020. We're continuing to collaborate on a framework. What's happening now, and I don't know if any of you have had outreach from the SPROG team. People are just going to communities and saying, would you like to hear about this? And what we're hoping to do is create a stakeholder group of people who know they need this. So we can get them to the table and they can at least be part of that forward discussion. Okay, can you pause it for a second? I am glad to be here today.
There we go.
So if you can hop over and grab those other 3 slides, I sent them to your email. So one of these stories, I can talk to you guys about this all day long. Parker Water, many years ago, how many of you have heard about the 3 states agreement for the endangered species? The whooping crane, better. A lot of people didn't think that the 3 states agreement was gonna happen. Parker Water was one of them. They built a reservoir called Ruder Hess. And it's about 70,000 acre feet. They didn't think that they were gonna be able to use SPRAP, which is the Colorado association that supports the 3 states agreement. So they went out and they bought a whole bunch of farms in Logan County. And the idea was that they were gonna use the Logan County transfer water to pay their depletions back. Then SPRAP happened and they had these Logan County farms. So now what we have is InterSPROG 2.0. So, well, they'll argue that they're actually 1.0 because they were actually moving forward first. So this is the Platte Valley Water Partnership. It's taking those Logan County farms that have already been purchased and already adjudicated. And it's actually working with the Lower South Platte Water Conservancy District, ag-based, to create another one of those loops. Right? So pretty soon what you're gonna start to see are these Venn diagrams of all of these loops kind of going around. This is a real project though. This is gotta be in place by 2035 to 2040. The key infrastructure are these, so here's River Test, that's down in Parker. There's a series of a small reservoir and a large reservoir, and they're gonna be using some of the ag ditches. The Pruitt system, for example, is one of the ditch systems. So it creates this water loop. But the Platte Valley Partnership, the municipal people involved in the Platte Valley Partnership have said that they will adhere to the strong values. And they are also looking for people to join them. But the understanding is that you have to be in agreement with those values. I think that's pretty unique. Yeah.
I just have a question of curiosity, since we have a number of interstate compacts that affect this state. If we're capturing and using these waters, are we in any danger at all of triggering, non-compliance is the right word? And of course, there's different measurements, whether it's CFS at a gate or 3 acre feet. And it's hard water, don't get me wrong, and it's a beautiful way, but at what point do we cross that?
Really good question. So the Colorado, the water plant update got put out in January this year, and all of the base and implementation plans were attached to it.
Right.
Coincidentally, that's when Nebraska said.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to things down.
Exactly, right.
They have actually pointed, Nebraska has said, we read about what your little plans are. And so now we're gonna build the Perkins Canal because we want to get every single drop of water we can. I think the Perkins Canal is almost like a, what, $600–700 million project. And for the amount of water allowed under the compact,
Right.
there's a lot of people saying that they're not sure it's even worthwhile. But if I wanted somebody to settle with me,
Oh, you absolutely with the process. Yeah, of course.
you know, you throw that gauntlet down. The Perkins, and we could talk about the Perkins like all in here. So very good question. Yes. One of the other questions is whether or not we can still maintain the 3 states agreement about the species.
Correct.
That's another question. All of that's good, right? So these pipelines are crazy. This is 102 miles. You know, and when you get down here, so Karen will tell you, TDS is a huge issue. Salt, it's the water degrades so quickly when you're down in this area. So now people are trying to figure out, well, do we pre-treat before you drop it in a 100-mile pipe? That is just nasty.
The chlorine residual.
Oh my God, can you imagine? So those are the questions, but this is, I think, when we start to look at those core values, what we're trying to do, the Platte Valley Partnership, I think, is one of the ways that we can do it. SPROG is definitely one of the things we need to try to get into place. They work together. So it doesn't, like, if you overlay this with a SPROG map, things start looking very Tinker Toyish. Like you can almost just kind of start moving little pieces around and it looks like it's very connected. And the conversation's open. Right? And so Castle Rock's part of this. Like my members who are still seeking development, supply development, are all talking about this. But it's already purchased water, it's already adjudicated. In terms of what Parker's bringing down. People can buy into this infrastructure. But you'd have to have water.
Is there any connection with what Aurora has done down in the Arkansas Valley, buying up the Rocky Ford ditch and all those farms and all that by and dry that will totally devastate that whole end of the state?
So it's really, really interesting. When you buy water rights on the Platte, there isn't those issues about the land because people sell the water and the land, and land becomes a cash crop for housing.
Right.
Yeah. What happened in the Arkansas is Aurora went down, bought it, dried it, but there was nobody using the land. So the land went fallow and it went nasty. There were meetings where, and this overlaps with my time in the war too. There were meetings where like they had to have police escorts. I mean, it was scary times. I would argue that probably can't happen now, but the fact that there are these partnerships that, you know, are developing, so the farms are still active. So when you'll hear this, and it sounds like kind of a bait and switch, and maybe a little bit of it is people will say, well, we bought the water, but we don't need it yet, so we're leasing it back, as if that makes it okay. that's not gonna last forever. Right? It's still a form of buy and try. So this is not that. This is actually forever agreement for both to use, but we'll see how that goes.
How does it not, like, for the Logan County farms that were purchased, how is that not buy and try?
Well, so that actually, that's a really good question. The intent really was that eventually that water was gonna be used to pay their depletions back for the construction of River Cuss. Then, I mean, they've had, I think, like at least one generation of farmers change over. That's how long they've been owned and operated, and now they'll just continue to be maintained. So they're either in lower water use crops, or they're using like interruptible supplies on those particular farms. But that's all been adjudicated. Those water rights have all been adjudicated. So I'm pretty sure what you see there now, it's likely what you're gonna continue to see. It really depends, how important is it for you to have ag? But I think you said 85% of the water is used in ag. I don't know about you guys, but I sure love going and getting 5 years of corn for, you know, whenever it's $1 or something. I always miscalculate those things. But that's the question, you know, ag is a tremendous economic driver for the state. And they actually do, you know, when you look at consumptive use and what they return to the river, they're the biggest water user, but they're also the biggest contributor to the cycle. So I don't know whether or not ag is the entire answer. But that's, and then these are just some of the support for the plan. So is that what you were looking for?
Yes.
All right, well, I think I'm out of time. Should probably very appropriate. You guys are probably tired of listening to me. The last two slides, so we'll switch back. Whenever I feel like it's just too much, it's just too big, I watch these videos. And this is JFK dedicating the Fry Arc project in Pueblo in 1961. Seems so forever.
Project possible. The world may have been built in 7 days, but this project was built in 30 years. And it took labor day in and day out, week in and week out, month in, month out, year in and year out, by congressmen and senators and citizens and the press of this state to make this project possible. And it will be some years before its full benefits are made available to all of you. What are we going to do in 1962, beginning today, to determine what projects we should develop, so that by the end of this century, when there are 300 billion people in the United States, that there will be available to them land and water and light and power and resources, places to live and places to rest and places to work. So we salute this project today, and we salute those who made it possible. And we look to the future, and we look to the past, and we commit ourselves in 1962, not only to celebrate this project, but to move ahead in all the other areas, stretching from California to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in building this country up.
This is the last part.
If we can buy these valuable projects today, they can be a great saving to our people 10 years from now. Every member of Congress, everyone in the executive branch, from the president on, in the field of national resources, has to plan during their period of administration or of office for the next generation. Because no project that we plan today will be beneficial to us. Anything we begin today is for those who come after us. And just as those who began something years ago make it possible for us to be here, I hope we'll fulfill our responsibility to the next generation that's going to follow us.
So whenever you think it's just never gonna work and the whole world's gonna fall apart, that's what you have to remember. Then that there really are people who care and who are trying to plan and trying to move it forward. And I just appreciate that thank you so much for listening. And I'm so happy that you want to know more about water, and you can contact me if you would want to talk about any of this. So. We have a lot of really great people coming this afternoon, a lot of my friends, so you guys are gonna be in good hands.
Do you have time for?
Yeah, of course. Well, if anybody has any questions. It's a lot. It is a lot for people to, I think sometimes it's hard for people to think, like, oh, let me ask you this. Do you think that people are more collaborative now?
Depends.
Yeah, the scarce resource is collaboration.
Their beliefs. And
That's
their ability, and their ability to listen.
I think collaboration's gotta be the way to go. What happens with collaboration is it takes longer and it's more expensive. And so when you start looking at some of these larger projects, I think we've got to remember to slow down. Which is so ironic, because I think we were just talking about how slow it takes. But I think that's the only way it works, right? Because I think when people feel as if they're over a barrel, like you were just saying, they'll go it alone.
Yeah. What are the forums for collaboration right now?
So the biggest forums for collaboration are probably, so the roundtables, which are an open forum, and they were created for dialogue. The SPROG concept was a regional, the task force though, I wouldn't say it's been shuttered, but it was getting to be too unwieldy, and it was mostly consultants. We found that a lot of people were coming, and it wasn't the stakeholders, it seemed like it was people looking for work. So we're kind of trying to rethink how that outreach happens. If you have interest, the Colorado Water Congress has a group called State Affairs. And of course, that's all about water issues and legislation. It's oddly quiet here in this state because CRUA is going on right now. And CRUA is the Colorado River Water Users Association meeting. So we always laugh and say all the evil people have gone to Las Vegas, which is, you read the stand, Stephen King, have a joke. But many people, for example, Northern, like Brad's there and Aurora's there. And it's one of the places where we're trying to get involved, because I say, as the Colorado goes, it goes for all of us. If the Colorado compact falls apart, or there was a compact call in the Colorado, there's one place they're coming, and they're coming for flat. So we've got the biggest target and the most to lose if the Colorado River stuff doesn't get fixed and fixed right. And so I think it's wrong to think that it's just the Trans Mountain rivers that have a voice. There's a task force now that's actually, and it's public. So look up Colorado River Drought Task Force. They have their own webpage. They have their own resources. Their recommendations are due. I think there's a draft report now, and the recommendations are due to the legislature by the end of the year. And it's like mid-December. So another big forum, there's a lot of conversations going on about non-essential turf. The conversation, so there are turf replacement programs that were aimed at residential, but that's not where the money is. The money is in these large, non-essential turf, and non-essential turf is basically turf that is only stepped on by the guy who takes care of it. Right, and I think that what happened was when people moved from back east, everyone wanted to create those bucolic pastures. And it's just not reasonable. So if you look at Las Vegas, who's been very successful with their turf replacement programs, some communities in California, the big money is pulling out the big swaths. Medians and, things like that. So that's another place. There's lots of forums having conversations. Colorado Waterwise, water quality, there's water quality forums. So there's a lot, depending on what you're interested in. What I will say is it's overwhelming. And I mean, that's my job, it's overwhelming. So, anyway.
The whole thing with compromise or compact is basically George Wallace, who's out to get scored. And the water, as Brad pointed out, 84% goes to agriculture. And if we collectively say, could we have the most votes, the front range, Denver, the metropolitan area, and say, okay, we're gonna convert that means some farmer in the middle of Eaton or someplace is gonna lose his water.
Well, so that gets really convoluted in the whole concept of property rights. So you own your water. And, you know, with somebody really gonna hold a gun to your head saying, well, now you've got to keep it in agriculture, and it's their 401k, you can't sell it,
Right?
right? And so it's an open market. And so conversations like that get really, really complicated really fast. Because people who say like, well, you know, we support agriculture, keep ag in business, the producers themselves are over there going like, oh, wait a second. You know, so if you look at the average age of a farm in the Platte, and I'm not talking about the people who do boutique squashes, but the actual real big farmers, they're in their 60s and their 70s, and their kids aren't coming back. And they're done. It's a hard life. It's a really hard life. And so of course they're gonna sell, and they're gonna sell for the highest price, which I mean, they've worked hard, and it's theirs, right? Another big issue is the public trust doctrine, which is what California has, which is protections about water and what can be done with water for the benefit of the state. It's kind of that concept, well, the state really owns the water, and in our state too, that's the truth. The state owns the water. But the public trust doctrine kind of goes counter to some of those property rights issues. That's another interesting.
Yeah. To kind of tie into agriculture, I mean, I get, and I don't know enough about it, like I totally know CSU has a program to teach, you know, people like me who know nothing about farming, if I got a wild hair and wanted to go be a farmer one day, how to do it legit, you know? I mean, you know, there's economics to it, and there's a business plan, and there's not just going and sticking a seed in the ground, throwing water on it. But at the end of the day, I'm just not aware of any either large or small scale kind of gap filling or bridge operations that are helping these farmers kind of bridge the technology gap, but also figure out how to get that water, whatever surplus it is, whenever they figure out how to reduce, you know, their impact on it, how to responsibly get that water to a next user, not necessarily to a developer, you know, somebody who's not gonna necessarily use it, stretch it, and like a municipality maybe would.
Well, so that's a great thought. It's a great place for us to carry the conversation. So do you know when water, if I'm a farmer and I sell my water to, when we go to court to make that transfer, because you gotta go to court to make the ag to muni transfer, the only water she can have was the consumptive use that my crops consumed, right? And that's what she's paying me on. So when she and I are doing the transaction, she said, well, you grow corn, I've got these aerials, I know how many acres, you calculate it to the nth degree. Tell me why I should be more efficient.
You know, and even like, okay, so
Right.
North Brighton they have a district plan, it's called something fancy now, but they did this transfer where they're trying to kind of be Boulder-ish and conserve farmland. What they found was when they tried to transfer it back to the farmer, the water was too expensive for them to use. They could lease back the land real cheap for $0 a month. When that farmer went to go pay their water bill, crop it to cost of water, they're like, I'm moving to Weld County.
It
And then
doesn't
they
pencil out. It really seriously does not pencil out. And so Weld County, so does everybody work for Weld County?
I just said it, yeah.
So
I work for a town in Weld County, not for the county, but Jason works for.
well, so it's interesting because I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think about the county's position on water transfers. And I don't know how many of you have actually followed it. Weld County, and it's probably been a few decades, but Weld County very much feels as if ag transfers like out of the county impacts the county in many ways. And so they've made, pipelines, like, the Thornton pipeline for the Thornton Northern project's an excellent example of those projects that we were talking about that take years and years and years and years, and when you finally go to do it, you can't. Right? I actually used to work for Thornton too. I worked a lot of places, but Thornton made me laugh and smile. They put in like one stick of pipe.
Yeah.
And it was a big hullabaloo because they put in one stick of pipe and it's not connected on either side. But somebody said, we just got it and win.
Yeah.
So we're gonna put in one stick of pipe, so we put one stick of pipe. So the county has taken this position where the getting 1041, getting approvals, has become really, really difficult for water. And whether or not that's appropriate or not, and how that impacts the communities in Weld County. The Arkansas, when Aurora did the Arkansas transfers, not many people know that they actually did do payments in lieu of taxes. So when the tax base changed, Aurora was paying money into the school districts. And there were all of these underlying economic benefits that I think got kind of lost in the chatter. But there's ways that you can make it a beneficial thing for everyone. If somebody's gonna put a pipe through my town, I'd say, I approve it, give me a tap.
Yeah.
And now what's happening with Prairie Waters is Aurora gets contacted on the regular because people want to tap off of it. But maybe that's what's gonna happen. So.
I can tell you that Jack wasn't so much open to that when I had to negotiate with him years ago.
Oh, man, you guys been around. But so
But that's what I said to do. And then we said there.
well, so I'll just tell you this real quick and then I'll let you go. But, the northern project, actually, Thornton hired brokers. Which is because they knew that if it was Thornton, no one would sell to them. So they actually had brokers buying the water. And so.
With NDAs.
And then some of the shareholders caught on and filed an injunction to get the judge to stop. They had to make it stop. So Thornton was stopped. And their goal was to, what you always want to do, and this is like the evil side of municipal water. Don't tell my brethren this, but what you always want is what? Control. You want 50.001, but you want control. And Thornton was stopped at like 49.0. Yeah, something like that. So they couldn't have control of water supply. Lots of stories like that, and characters, there are characters. Make it just, makes your hair curl. Anyways, well, listen, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I am, yeah, I'll see you guys later. You guys take care.
Yeah, we're gonna take a short
Yeah,
break.
5 minutes or so.
About 5-minute break, use the restrooms, because you got a
Yes.
We're gonna get started because we are, of course, going to be running late.
Sorry, shifted as you.
So we've got a good group of speakers here. The first set, we're gonna hear from the city of Loveland, Town of Windsor, city of Greeley, and then we're gonna do kind of all the presentations in a row, and then we've got a period for discussion afterwards, and we'll open it up. So our first speaker will be Todd Hamlin. He's the Water Resources Manager from the city of Loveland and has been so since December 2020. He has previous experiences in the consulting world, and we've worked for about 30 water resources engineering. So, and some trouble water rights settlement negotiations as well.
Yeah.
So let's hear from Todd, and then we'll continue on our way after Todd. So go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. Just gonna walk through a little bit. We recently in 2020 completed an update to our water supply master plan. And so a lot of this information is coming from that, and it kind of sets the status where the city of Loveland is in terms of their water supply. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the issues moving forward that we see. City of Loveland relies on two main sources, trench basin water to the western slope, and then also native shares water out of the Big Thompson River. The thought has always been that this diversity provides some redundancy. By having some water in one basin and then water in another basin, we're somewhat protected in terms of interruptions to supply. Some of this though, and it's something we'll talk about later, is kind of being challenged, particularly with fire and ability for fire to come over the continental divide and expand much larger than, and encompass much larger areas than we ever imagined. This is a aerial image of our main facilities. Green Ridge Glade Reservoir is our main storage vessel, if you will. About 7,000 acre foot. It sits right above our water treatment plant, which is great. The issues that we do have from time to time is that the only way to get water into Green Ridge Glade is to use the Charles Denson feeder canal, which is a federal canal that goes on, extends on up into Horseshoe. When you're dependent on other people's infrastructure, you kind of got to ride and backseat a little bit. And so when they're using that canal, we can shove that. But it's otherwise it's a great layout because it allows us to move water largely by gravity in our water company. Here's kind of a schematic, if you will, of our water supply system. You can see the trans basin water that comes in. We have a number of options there in terms of getting it into the feeder canal through the Olympus Tunnel, the Billy Tunnel. And then we can get it into Green Ridge Lake. We also have direct, what we call the Loveland Pipeline, which is a head gate on the Thompson River south, and we can use that to take water straight into the plant. And here, this redundancy has helped us a little bit in having several pathways, if you will, to get water into the treatment plant. When we saw water quality issues in the river, we could go off the river and rely on the reservoir. The rest of it is a variety of ditches, some of which then we take ditch shares and convert them to provide our future water supply. This graphic kind of is a broad overview of where we're at, our status of the city of Loveland. We're quite fortunate. The people that came before us have done an excellent job at accumulating a pretty robust portfolio, if you will, of water supply. So the red line represents our firm yield projection. So we have a model that we run and it kind of looks at historical drought and tells us what we think is what the firm yield will be. For our variety of our water sources. You can kind of see there, it comes along. We are a participant in Chimney Hollow, so when that comes online, we see a good bump. We also have a small reservoir that we're planning on our own, gravel pit type reservoir, but it's very useful in terms of its firm yield contribution. And that, when those are completed, that will get us up to about 30,000 acre foot a year of firm supply. The other three graphs are our projected demands. And so there's a high and a medium and a low kind of curve there, because projecting demands is always a perilous activity. And so it's we think we have quite a bit of surplus or redundancy at the present time. But this then will start closing out around the year 2060 based on this projection here. And you'll probably hear the same story from a lot of municipalities. You really have to stay ahead of the curve here. If you're not 20, 30 years ahead of the curve, that's just how long it can take water supply projects to come to fruition, if not longer. And because of that, then that requires us to look ever farther, if you will, over the planning horizon as we can.
Yes. Good question. How do you project demand, and considering the trends over the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years, how demand has declined with growth increasing, demand declining, is that factored into those scenarios, or are you kind of being conservative with your demand?
Yes and no. I mean, we've seen the same thing in a lot of municipalities. You'll see, I've actually seen our population has grown, but our demands have not. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is conservation. We're being much more frugal with how we use our water and that sort of thing. As an engineer, the things that scare us is that, we have 10 years and it's saying that our demands are bouncing around but not going up. But we also know those are those representative years? Is the data fooling us? Are we just seeing a little aberration here and the longer term trends go on? And so you kind of have to take a space shuttle approach to this and just say we can't have failures. And so we try to incorporate some of that. And I think if we continue to see it, historically it hasn't necessarily been in the data if you go back over much longer, but there does kind of show a flattening now. And if that flattening is true, or of course, if the trajectory is not going to continue, is yet to be determined a bit. And so, but there's a large degree of conservatism in this stuff, just because the perils of running out of water are pretty severe. There's supply uncertainties that worry us. So what's climate change going to do? What's forest fire? And so we have models and we can tease the numbers out here to 6 decimal points. But it's a lot of projection and a lot of trying to see ahead and a lot of kind of cross currents and how those will all combine together, trying to make it difficult to necessarily rely on them.
What extent does land use planning influence your thing? Because if the city of Lubbock says, hey, we're gonna go put a 30-story apartment building as opposed to quarter acre lots, that has an impact. How do you plan that? Because now you get politicians who may be in college today, but 10 years ago on the city council want to do something totally different than your plan says.
Fudge factor. We would say that healthy fudge factor and all this stuff. There's a lot of things out of our control, and we're only have a partial vision of what's going on. And if we're looking back, that's easy. You're looking forward, boy, that gets really hard and really risky. And so what you do see is, unfortunately, as a result is as our fudge factors increase, we basically to handle, so that we can handle that risk tolerance. To the extent that those risks can be shrunk, then we can narrow down our fudge factor. But right now, those are growing. Not many of those are getting smaller in terms of those risks. When you start talking about things like Colorado River and curtailment and climate change and zoning changes and development guidelines, getting away from Kentucky bluegrass and into more native. What will all of these cumulative effect of all of these changes be? It's difficult to look ahead. One thing that we do have that other municipalities not, and somewhat of a luxury in terms of looking ahead, is that we do have we are bounded, so we have a growth boundary. So we're only gonna get so big. And then once we hit that, we talk about build out, and then after build out will come build up. And we really don't know what built up will look like just yet. Our last master plan, 2060, about coincides with build out. Our next master plan will kind of have to look over into that next decade and what's the first 10 years of build up look like. We think it'll be less as things consolidate, but we're gonna have to see, when we get there, we'll start looking at what those data is and see what we can learn from other larger municipalities when they've encountered the same sort of thing. They've hit their growth boundary. What did they see decline, and to what extent in terms of water demand growth? In terms of a summary, we're certainly in very good shape. We feel very good right now. 30 years from now is a different matter, but right now we're in great shape. Our current demands are around 15,000 acre foot per year, and as Karen indicated, they've kind of been bouncing along. But our highest man year is about 8 years ago, I think, is the highest that we've had. And so we have about 30,000 acre feet in firm supply right now. And that should get us to build up to 2060. Beyond then is gonna have to do, that's kind of our next job in terms of looking ahead. But we do update our master plan every 10 years, so that we can kind of keep abreast of this stuff. We think our current portfolio is quite diverse and extremely robust. There's a lot, about a year or two ago, when the Colorado River was kind of blowing up, there was a lot of concern about water supply and is it there? And a lot of that was just the noise, if you will. And everybody is different, but we think we're in a very good shape. Future projects, Chimney Hollow, I mentioned, Water Bank, we will have some change cases coming forward where we'll convert ditch shares that have been placed there. Great Western Reservoir, we do have a Green Ridge Glade expansion possibility. We're really starting to look more into water conservation as a water supply in lieu, if you will, sort of thing. Penny saved is a penny earned. I think there's opportunity here. This is a lot cheaper to get an acre foot of conservation than develop an acre foot into supply. And I think that holds great promise for us. And we're seeing regional cooperation on a number of fronts that I think could provide, as we compete less and cooperate more, there are some win-wins that can be developed in the water rights, water coliseum, if you will. Top issues, supply reliability and vulnerability. We may have enough, but it may be black, and we've seen that when the fires roll through. And there's a lot of unburnt land up there yet to go. So that has been identified as maybe our number one risk element right now. Drought, climate change, Colorado, they're kind of slow moving train wrecks, if you will, and trying to get a handle on those. Supply development does occupy a lot of our time, and then we are concerned about growth and what that'll do, whether, build out and just projecting it is, it's kind of a wild science. Okay. Was it?
Todd, well, we'll get changed over here.
Yeah.
So are you relying on the current 30,000 kind of shares that you already have, or are you requiring developers to bring it in?
We're still requiring to bring it. It's a continuing thing, and I think there's, yeah, it would be a great concern to stop. Just say, we got enough, forget about it, you know, yeah, that wouldn't happen.
But you still have a cash in lieu option for development.
We do,
Yeah.
but that cash in lieu, the purpose of the cash is to go out and buy watersheds and to, or to develop Great Western River, other senior water supply development as a illustrator. Whatever makes sense.
That's kind of something you're doing behind the scenes, seeing where that value is best.
Right, right. And that was one thing we did do recently is cash in lieu was always based on CBT, which is 70,000 and going.
Yeah.
And we did recently kind of get off of that gold standard, that crazy train. Because frankly, if someone gave us $10,000 and said, go get water, we wouldn't buy CBT. We would do something else. And so it didn't really make sense. And so that did allow us then to bring our cash in lieu down to where, it'll be around 47.
All right, well, thanks, Todd. And now we're gonna hear from Shane Hale, who's the town manager of the Windsor, town of Windsor. He's a fourth generation Coloradan. He's worked in Colorado local government for 20 years, including time in Contra Springs, Grand Lake, City of Cortez, and then currently in Windsor. He's been a lot. He's been around. He's got a lot of values, different values that he has in Colorado. He is also a fly fisherman. He works to balance the need to preserve water as a natural resource while realizing that water is one of the building blocks for economic prosperity. So seeing a lot of that conflict and value that we've all discussed and talked about, you know, many times over already in this class. So thank you, Todd. Thank you, Shane. Happy to welcome you here.
Okay, thank you. And I forgot to mention in that write-up that I'm also a personal mentor to Nick and to. Actually, tell any of my proteges here, don't hold that against me. I actually had worked up, I wanted to tell you guys a quick joke about unemployment, but unfortunately, it doesn't work. So, right. So, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. So, the thing for this is a little bit timing for Windsor, right? You know, Windsor's, you know, we're not a big town, we're not a small town, we're just kind of medium, right? But the issue that we have is just a little bit of timing and timing of when we've grown and how we've developed. So just a little bit about the town. So we're about 26 square miles, but we only focus on our water area is this in the dark blue, right? So everything east of Colorado Boulevard, south of Harmony Road, kind of north of 34. Over here is Park Holmes Loveland, so Mr. Chris Pletcher in the back. And then up here is North Wellwater. So we have about, today we're gonna probably treat around 2 million gallons of water. And on our hottest day, probably about 4 million gallons. Right now, our total population is a little under 45,000, but we're really focused on the kind of 25, 26,000 in this area and making sure we have enough water for them. So this is a little busy, but this shows, you know, unlike Fort Collins, Loveland, Greeley, we relied a lot on CBT. Basically, as the town has grown, people just come in and develop those CBT units for us. So those have been our building blocks, and CBT is gold standard, but we know CBT is about residence quarry, right? Everybody else has bought it up. It's not really for sale. And so this is CBT here, and then right up here, the second one is North Poudre Irrigation, which is also CBT, right? So a lot of our building blocks over time have really just been that we haven't had a lot of other native sources. Obviously, we went through a change case to get some lake water, which was helpful. But other than that, we've been kind of relying on CBT. And then we have a couple blocks in here with with Greeley and Loveland. But I'll talk about in a couple things for regional collaboration, but that's what our water looks like. I think the big takeaway here is we look at our fur yield. So this is like in a hard year and a drought year. we're running really close. The big purple thing here is NISP. And so of course, one of the big part of our portfolio, we don't actually have yet. So, the one thing that we did really well in the town of Windsor and in really good planning was with our non-potable system. So in 1994, Water Valley was coming online. They pitched the idea of developing a non-potable system. So let's just pilot it here. And so at the time, we knew about 50% of the water use was happening, about a half an acre foot was needed per house, and about 50% of that was just outdoor watering. So we piloted that for about 10 years. I think it was about 8 years, and then we just codified it. We just said, everybody who builds in town of Windsor needs to bring a non-pot system. So made it mandatory. All these systems are privately managed. So the HOA manages the water. The big idea is a field comes in under development. All the water that's been watering wheat or corn, whatever's been on there, stays on that land, right? So it just stays there. It waters the grass where they have there. We make it a requirement for everybody. And since we put that policy in, as you see, the blue line is our potable water only. And you see that's basically remained flat, right? There's a few houses that weren't a part of that policy, kind of grandfathered. For the most part, though, you see that this non-potable system, what it's done with our dual use system, and it's just skyrocketed. So the majority of homes in Windsor now are non-potable systems. Yeah, it's really cool, right? Good planning. So, the benefits I think are numerous. One is it keeps water in the ditches, right? So for the non-water people, water in ditches helps, bring water to you, right? So if you're the last user, if everybody's taking the water out beforehand, you may not get that water. So the more you just keep the water in the ditch and it pulls it down for everybody. It obviously stretches the capacity of the existing water plants. It reduces our peak demand. You see that we're kind of 2 million gallons a day. Our hottest 80 is 4 million gallons. I think if we weren't relying on non-potable systems, we may be talking our high water day, maybe 10 million gallons, right? So we don't really have those big peak demands. Obviously, it keeps water in the river, and there's a lot of environmental benefits of not treating water and putting it on type of bluegrass. So again, in Windsor, and I think we've all seen the growth, right? So this is basically the same slide you saw earlier, which is just our population, right? So as our population has grown, so is our use for our non-potable systems. It's been about 400% since 2000. And like we said before, CBT really isn't an option for the town any longer. But this is kind of our time scale. So if you look at the city of Greeley, their 1970 population, about 39,000 people. Fort Collins is 43,000. So that's about what Windsor is now, right? But we're doing it 50 years later. So when you think from a permitting standpoint, like when they built Boyd Lake, I don't know, this is an actual history, but I'm guessing that like the mayor of Love or Greeley just goes up with the backhoe and takes a hole, right? I mean, it couldn't have been that hard. It couldn't have been that hard to get this stuff done back in the day. Seaman Reservoir, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you were around then, Todd, but I'm sure there wasn't. I'm messing. So, anyway, so now from a permitting standpoint and also water acquisition rights, and we don't have a lot of native rights. So again, I think the town, we're just so small, that we just kind of rely on development to come in, so I'd say we weren't really that proactive. We really weren't out doing these things. But now that we're hitting the growth, now that we're really large enough to think and plan and use some strategy, our options are a lot less. So we put a lot of eggs in our basket in this. Like Todd mentioned, these projects takes 20 to 30 years to get online. We started this project about 20 years ago. I think it was about 2004 when we entered into this. At the time, we were told it was going to be 5 years, right? So far, we're right on track with that. It'll yield 3,300 acre feet for the town. So basically, the dark blue area that I showed earlier, the town needs to fill. This is going to meet our demands for that. I mean, this is, I don't say the last time we ever require water, but it may be, right? Like this is our project. For anybody here, you guys may feel a certain sort of way, read the Colorado in it, or you save the food, or whatever you may feel a certain sort of way about this. But I'll tell you that it is the most environmentally friendly way to get this water. As you guys talk about other options to get water, what have people done? Buy and dry, right? So when you think about the total demand of 40,000 acre feet for all the users in the area that we've identified, if not for NISP, how do we do that, right? Well, it's all these 15 different agencies out buying up farms and drying them. So even though people don't necessarily love the idea, I still think it's the best option we have in front of us. There's no better options. And then, so with this, so right now we think our cost is about 150 million. The project itself is north of 2 billion now, which is a fun number. And then Fort Collins just added 1041 regulations, which you guys want to drink some whiskey and pop later. Hey, how feel about that? And then we all know that NOCO's population will double by 2050, right? So we can stick our head in the sand and say, no more people. It's already too busy. I hate going to King Supers, it's too busy, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're coming, right? Where's that on Northern Colorado? So we can either plan for it and have water for them or not. And so again, to just kind of bring this back in, before I talk a little bit about regional collaboration more. So the few ones here I want to identify are this black, which is the city of Greeley, and this blue, which is what we call the Love Leaf. So when we talk about NISP and our water policies, and Ellen asked earlier, what if they're still requiring water? I think for the town of Windsor, we're not. With NISP and $150 million project and really feeling like it's going to be our last great hope, right? Like this is our project. And because we don't have a water portfolio, what we have done is identified with the city of Greeley and the city of Loveland and entered into a water lease. And so, as you saw, the city of Greeley has water until the year, 2060, when they feel okay, right? So they've got a little fudge factor in there, they feel comfortable. So we're basically renting gap water from them. We just entered into a lease within the last month where we can rent up to 500 acre feet per year. And so that 500 acre feet per year, I think we will pay first year $325,000 for that. What is that? 3 CPT units? And then 3 acre feet of water you get for $325,000. We get 500 acre feet from the city of Loveland. From their end, they get $325,000 from the county of Windsor on water they don't need yet. So it's a win-win. It's a real collaborative effort. With the city of Greeley, it was a drought year only. And so the city of Greeley said, we don't want to lease you water to build houses in Windsor. So we will lease water if you have a drought issue. So that's why you see their black line just in the planning year, which is a 60% yield, and the firm yield of 50%, where we have Greeley's in there, because if we have full CPT quota, we're not eligible for that water. But again, that's another 350 acre feet. So between the two, kind of like renting furniture in college or whatever, we're basically renting water. And so we'll pay even between the two of them about $500,000 a year to rent that water, which is just pennies on the dollar. I'm actually going and acquiring that water. And then the other IGA or the other effort I've mentioned is doing a treatment plant with Fort Collins, Loveland, Severance, and Eaton. And so we're working together. And again, that's to treat, primarily we started out to talk about NISP, but we're just seeing kind of a regional need to build more plant capacity. So I think that's it. I think that's what I have. Okay. Yeah.
Question for Jane? Yeah, David?
With the non-pot system, if there's not an existing well on there, what does the town accept for non-pot water?
Right, well, that's a good question. So again, we're not accepting any non-pot. These are managed by the HOAs and the Metro District. So those never dedicated to the town of Windsor. So basically our requirement is that any outdoor use is addressed with non-potable water. So sometimes these properties will have wells on them. They can certainly use that to water. A lot of times they have ditch rights, right? That native ditch rights. And so when you think about it, again, if this was a cornfield, this is just water that's been pulled, off a major ditch, spring ditch, some ditch, and pulled through for years. And so we just keep that flow there, right? We keep the return flows, keep everything on that property. So it's basically uninterrupted for all the downstream users. They don't have to bring in a new water source. And so we just, if you got water rights on the property, you got to keep them. Sometimes they need to augment and purchase more, but again, it's other both the ditch rights.
But your water acre foot versus a half, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
they give you some sort of engineering, plan, is that how that works?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically where we've seen over time that with the no outdoor use, that basically a single family home in Windsor needs a quarter acre foot. And then basically it's actually about 0.1 acre foot. But when you look at the losses from the plant, transportation, everything else, we get that quarter acre foot dedication and then kind of a look back and maybe 25, 30 years of history, understanding what the use is. So that's why we really require a quarter acre foot dedication for potable use.
Yeah.
But the non-potable, we're not actually running that calculation. I think a typical application is 3 acres of water for every acre of land you can irrigate. But again, we're also recommending people pull out bluegrass and don't just start with really thirsty plants. And so we've been flexible with that non-potable dedication over time, because we don't want to encourage just build bluegrass.
But the developer actually deliver to you an engineering report that says there's a satisfactory non-potable system. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so we can, statute allows you to do that once, right? For marine development, say, run those calculations, show us that you have enough water to meet the needs. Yeah, so that's an engineering report, and you can ask for that as it develops. You can wait until they want the final CEO to say, give me that report.
Gotcha.
If I can, Shane, and going back to what we did in Windsor, changing from having, the dual systems, we've taken our, gross gallons per capita per day from about 80 down to 45 in both, and that's an average between both. We're having the 3,000-ish accounts for, that don't have a dual system to those that do. And it's been tremendous.
It was about 120 down to 80.
I have it at 27.
Okay.
Sorry.
We actually disagree on that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that Fort Collins has aspirationally their number to at 130. 130 gallons per day per house.
And that's just residential, so.
Okay, and real quick, Jennifer, and then we'll transition.
I think context, you just said there's a small portion of houses that aren't, or businesses, houses that aren't on your non-pot system.
Okay.
A non-pot system, and the non-pot system isn't public per se. But is there any look in the future to make it public and to get those places that aren't on non-pot, so you stretch it a little further in the future and come up, what is it?
That's a good question. So we have, for the town, so all of our strong non-pot. I mean, if you play golf in Windsor, I think we have 4 golf courses, aren't ours. It's a good way to run into David Eisenground, but, so all those are on non-pot. But when you look at the 3,000 or so homes, I mean, really what that is running a lot of purple pipe. It's just a lot of infrastructure, right? So infrastructure is really easy when you kind of have virgin ground, virgin soil before you build anything. It's really hard to go in and tear up sidewalks and roads.
It's probably the older part of town,
It is.
the historic part of town.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a classic 3000. So, again, we do have a lot of people downtown actually on a well system. So, and we know when Windsor Lake fluctuations on the map happens there. So I think there's a lot of seep, there's a lot of things that happen over time there. So we do have a lot of those homes on well systems, but they're not on a non-pot, they're traditional non-pot.
It seems like a feat, but it's something that somebody's gotta figure out that I can try and figure out after y'all figure it out.
Well, I'm sorry, Jennifer, are you like a consultant? Are you coming in? Is this a sales pitch?
I'm a planner, like plagiarism and all these things are in my veins, we just take and we reuse and we, we're not gonna reinvent the wheel if the wheel is good and not broken, we're government. We're effective and efficient.
Right. So what we have, it's just such a de minimis amount and so much of our growth is going to non-pot right now. It may be in 20 years, there'll be a push for it, but right now, there's not a big effort or thought to do that.
All right, thanks, Shane. And now our final speaker for this morning is Todd Boreski. Boreski, and he's a Deputy Director of Water Resources for Greeley. He leads the city's conservation, high mountain reservoir operations, and non-potable water system operations, water resource operations, and water resource planning groups. Before joining Greeley, he was with Denver Water for about 5 years. Has an engineering background, as so many folks in water do. So go ahead, Todd, and then we'll wrap it up with some more discussion.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna kind of cover a brief history of Greeley, talk about when it was a little easier to develop water, kind of what got us to where we are today, and then address kind of at a high level, some of the challenges and what we're doing to meet those challenges. You guys heard my introduction. I guess I'll go back and just show you my cute daughter there, but that's the one thing you didn't see. So, Greeley did develop at a time when it was a little easier to develop water. You didn't have a backhoe in 1870, but the Union Colony was located right between the Poudre and South Platte River. And, we quickly found out that for some of the water intensive crops that farmers were hoping to grow, that we needed more higher quality water. So early farmers built a ditch system from the mountains all the way to Greeley. As kind of things progressed, we quickly found out that in the city, we were gonna need a more stable supply of water. We were gonna need water outside of just kind of the snow-packed wet season. So our kind of first step into that was building a diversion above Fort Collins and putting in our first slow sand filter in Bellevue. So that was, I think, 1904 you mentioned. So yeah, definitely a little bit easier time to develop water. And so today we pull our water from 4 different basins. So we have the Trans Basin from the, you can actually see that, Colorado River. We have from the Big Thompson Basin. Then we have a tunnel that pulls Trans Basin from the Laramie. And of course, the Poudre Basin. I think you had a presentation earlier on Terry Ranch. That's, I think, technically part of the Laramie Basin, but it's self-contained. So we don't really consider it as part of our system there. As for our infrastructure, we have 2 treatment plants. So Bellevue is kind of our baseline plant, runs about 35 MGB. It runs 365 days a year. Then we have the Boyd Lake plant. That's kind of our peaking plant that we use when we hit some of the summer peaking. If you look here, we have 500 miles of pipeline, bunch of meters, bunch of hydrants. We're running a large city infrastructure as Greeley's in the transition from being a medium-sized to kind of large-sized city. On the non-pod side, we have a smaller formal system, but we rely heavily on the ditch infrastructure that's been built and established over the last 100 years. And currently, I think it's a little under 10% of our total water use comes from non-pod during the kind of high point of the season when we're running our peaking plant. As for wastewater, we have 1 plant treating about 7.5 million gallons a day. You may have seen some news on that recently. We just actually finished one of the phases to meet some of the new regulations. A whole lot more is going to be happening in the short term to continue as things get a little tighter on the regulatory side. So to kind of put that into a picture of where Greeley's at and where our water is coming from. So we're pulling water, all from the mountains all the way through Greeley. Like I said, really exemplifying that huge infrastructure footprint. And then our non-pod system, you can see the kind of Poudre running through the middle here. It's just pretty much south of the river right now, basically where the city is developed, but we have aspirations as the city continues to grow for it to be a larger system and grow significantly. I think 3 to 4 times larger than it is now in terms of water service. And so I kind of have really specific challenges up here because I'm sure the other folks who have presented can mention on aging infrastructure, how hard it is to compete for operators right now, things like managing the changing regulatory environment. But we have some of our own challenges being a really rapidly growing city far away from our source of supply. So this is kind of showing that infrastructure footprint of Greeley and basically everything it takes to bring our supply into the city. So it is quite the footprint, quite the conveyance that's required. It's kind of fun. We have a huge chunk of our water resource staff in Fort Collins because they're up the Poudre Canyon quite a bit. So we really have a system and staff that represent northern Colorado. And then we have our long-range expected growth area, which expands well beyond where the city is right now. And working in a utility that's in this situation we're dealing with, build out and build up. We're thinking that, kind of happening simultaneously with how our downtown core is and, knowing that we're going to continue to grow closer to the mountains. So we're always planning for a supply portfolio that reflects this. And we recently finished up our integrated water resource plan that started to look at how we actually take time to understand exactly what we need. So we took things into account like, let's say it really develops really, high density models. Let's say it develops a little more kind of towards single family lots. Let's say climate change is on kind of the extreme end. Let's say there's no climate change. Really trying to do a bookend approach to say what are the extremes that we could see and what do we need to plan for. So as you can see here on the left side, this is kind of showing our 2020 to 2070 population projection. So in 2070 we're looking at somewhere between 180 and 311. Huge uncertainty in serving a population of water. And I think at build out, we're well above 400,000 is kind of the anticipation. If we're looking at the water demand projection side of things, we see a similar thing. It's not tied only to population. This is looking at things like long-term firm yields of what we can expect as water rights become more scarce, as firm yield estimates kind of decrease with climate change. Colorado River, huge uncertainty there. So, right now it's on the low end. We could be looking at 30,000 acre feet per year, or on the high end, 70. And I know a few folks have alluded to the price of CBT. That is expensive, that gap. So we're trying to be really adaptive in how we plan for somewhere in between, with different trigger points that help us check in on where we're at in the progression process of growing into our footprint. Another thing I want to point on that I think one of you mentioned was on wildfires. So I mentioned, and I showed the map showing our kind of 4 basins. 2 of our 4 basins burned pretty significantly within the last 10 years. So the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome fires. That has caused us to have down days running our plant from sedimentation, erosion. The quality of water in the river is not acceptable for treatment. So it's something, that is a constant problem that we're still dealing with, and we're trying to be proactive in ensuring that the size and severity of these fires don't happen again. And so the kind of basis of how we operate as a department starts on the formal master planning side. I mentioned our kind of integrated water resources plan. We went away from that traditional master plan approach where it was, here's exactly what's going to happen, we're going to do it regardless, to have more scenario-based adaptive management where we're checking in. And then we kind of complement that with some of the other formal planning efforts we do. And I'll touch on efficiency and conservation and non-pot. And so this is just showing that, I said investing in watershed health, how we kind of mitigate fires that have recently happened, or how we plan for fires that may happen in the future and make them less severe, less large. This is just showing all of the efforts we're putting into it. It is a huge regional effort. It is money from local, state, federal. I think on the existing fires, there's been about 30 plus million spent so far on the Cameron East Troublesome, anticipating another 5 million in the next 2 years in Forest Service money. So there is a huge effort from Greeley, from our partners, to really invest in the watersheds, because that's what controls the quality and quantity of our sources. We put conservation at the forefront of how we operate. That's kind of helps us set a more sustainable baseline. I think there's been a theme kind of chatting that conservation is just good bang for your buck. And we have a pretty built out team. We do assessments, rebates, incentives, certifications, landscape replacement programs. We're just now pushing into trying to get these programs into some of our more targeted neighborhoods, low income, renters, areas that historically are a little bit harder for conservation programs. So we actually just hired a full-time person focused fully on that, which I think will be a huge help to get conservation across our service area and kind of hit some of those DEI focuses that we're seeing in our industry. Dairy Ranch, I think you got a full presentation on this. It's a drought resilient supply, a contained aquifer, basically a huge storage tank north of the city. This provides an option for us to have water through periods of drought and a sustainable portfolio. It complements our existing acquisition strategy. So really is still, we're planning to grow into our footprint, so we need to keep buying water. This does not replace our need to buy water. We've gotten direction from our water and sewer board, who's heavily invested in our operations, that they want that to be a drought bucket that helps us kind of sustainably operate the ebbs and flows of demand and availability. And then we have, innovating and adapting. I think this is huge, there is a whole lot of work that's happening outside of our industry that can be applied. So we recently started to formalize data empowerment and kind of tech enablement, putting our most data savvy folks together in a room and having them share, where they've seen tools or trends that could impact how we operate. We're investing in this, which is LiDAR-based snow observations, helping to really increase the projections on runoff, which is a cool program that we've been having to support for a few years now. Geospatial AI, using all the tech buzzwords, applying it to our industry. We're a little behind on kind of AI and machine learning, but it's happening. And we have some really smart individuals who are helping to push us in these spaces. Other things, acoustic leak detection, just really cool methods for trying to maintain a huge system and a huge infrastructure footprint. All I have. Thank you.
And then, yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
Ty, I'll apologize ahead of time for asking a sensitive question here, especially since you've got a couple city of really folks in the room with you. But this isn't just for you. I mean, it could be any of the municipalities or anybody in the room for that matter who deals with this tough subject of conservation, for public projects, right? When you have a community that expects certain things, okay? But can you talk about Bittersweet and the decision that the city made to go to more conservative type of efforts, but yet seems to have been backtracked? Because when you're looking to promote conservation, when we see communities or leaders that make those types of backtrack decisions, it's honestly hard for the average resident to get on board with, why would I do it if our leaders aren't doing it? Can you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely can. That whole process happened before my time. I don't know if everyone's kind of familiar, but the city planned a really alternative landscaping approach that was more water conscious. There ended up being some pushback that, Deb would be aware of on the political side related to it. It happened to be located near a memorial. The first year of a project like that is always a little on the browner side. So it doesn't reach its full beauty. And this is a problem I think we're going to have across our industry. We're working with some other partners on similar projects. And I think the spot we missed out on it was communicating expectations early on what the project would look like. I wasn't aware in the decision-making process with the communication plan that happened at the time, but I think we really need to have folks understand that these projects take time to develop. As for putting a kind of flip-flopping a little bit, I think it's less of a formal flip-flop and more of a compromise. It seemed like we were able to address the folks who are concerned about the aesthetics of the memorial, push towards, the landscaping that folks would think was more appropriate there. And, the politics supported that. And then you were able to see, that the rest of the Bittersweet kind of buy us some time to let it develop, let the residents see what it could be. And I think this year, it was beautiful compared to, some of the pictures I saw from the first year. So I don't know if we have numbers on complaints that came, but I would anticipate that, by the time you get to year 2, 3, 4, there's hardly anything. It's just folks surprised by the first year that it's not, Kentucky further out in green, overwatered. So it's important. I think it's important to find those compromises. We could have probably identified that in design to say, we're going to do something different here. And maybe it was more hardscaping, something that would have been more respectful, I guess, is kind of the term of just what was going on there. So I think, the city now knows we need to be more thoughtful of some of the sensitivities around it. So definitely a learning lesson.
What was it? A bunch of dead grass around the memorial or what?
Just brown. It was just Colorado native grasses that don't stay as green as long. They were a bit
bluegrass.
Yeah, they were a bit patchy, because it was the first year with plantings. There's kind of a parking spot there. There were some events, so it just really didn't look good in year one. But there shouldn't have been the belief that it would look good in year one.
Well, that's type of stuff you don't mow, right? Because often you let it grow, and so it wasn't. Again, you're dealing with what's good on the conservation side, but what does the public expect to see when they go to a park, right? The presentation of it.
Yeah, and then also maybe the public learns something when there's signs of notice of change.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Pay attention, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we water professionals can be a bit of an echo chamber where we come to accept this idea a lot sooner than the general public, and we need to really take the time to bring the public up to speed and give them time to process it. That was a huge one to kind of be like, here's the example that's so visible, so important to the city. I don't know, maybe there was a way we could have done a few smaller, less kind of traffic parks first that got people comfortable with it. But now folks, have seen it, they understand it, so we anticipate all the next projects will be easier and not have the same kind of pushback.
Well, and I was gonna say, I think too, what serves us well is that we always have this great reputation in really well county. We've got great water. We're good. We're set above a lot of you guys or whatever. And so I think our population thinks, well, we got water abundantly, we have no worries. So I think that also was part of it. Why do we have to change it? We got plenty of water, which
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift, I think, again, of getting people to think differently about water. Whether we think we have enough or not, again, and not being freak shows that it's scarcity crazy, but again, it's just, again, shifting mindset.
The high advantage that for water quality coming off the mountain from the burn areas, are you diverting it from the treatment plant, doing like a pre-treatment? Like, what is that? How does that work functionally?
Yeah, so that's not my area of expertise. I kind of have a high level understanding of how we operate it. So we have enough storage on site that we were able to kind of weather the storm on these events. They tend to be during big rain events. So you have 24, 48 hours where, TDS is too high, that the dissolved solids, it's black coming down. We had some kind of other agreements that, we could exchange water with some of the agriculture ditch companies. I don't know if we actually ended up using them, but we had the option to. And then we do have, diversity in our sources that we could pull from. If we were to see a fire that took out a whole watershed, I could see that being an opportunity to integrate Terry Ranch outside of drought. That could be kind of an exception to pulling that water down. So yeah, just always having that robust system, resiliency, and having steps you could take, even because if we had a week of continuous rain or a 2013 flood event that kind of came through, we would have been scrambling, as would probably most of our neighbors.
And shifting gears just to compare to Todd and Loveland, what is Greeley's 2024 cost per acre foot
In terms of
cash and live value, or?
I'm not 100% what it is. I know we're assessing it. The market's grown much faster than, we tend to update cash in lieu. So I'm not sure exactly where it's at or where it's going to be, but I'm sure we're looking to update it now.
I want to open it up to just general questions for folks. I wanted to ask, looking at these different communities and your planning efforts, how much is there like a shared discussion going on? Like, for example, City of Greeley, you've got these kind of more quite robust ways of looking at scenarios for demand and growth. And, probably some complex models of how you're doing that. And I wonder, like, how much is that talked about with other communities or like shared? And is that shareable because it's a very specific model probably to Greeley, but yeah. What's the conversation like between your municipalities?
Well, I'd say talking about the modeling, there's a lot in water that's still, really protected, right? And so, if anybody in this room went through change case tomorrow, there's no friends in that change case. So, water's still water, and it's still really proprietary, it's still protected. But we did start maybe 4 years ago, we did a water strat-off with, so at the time it was Loveland, Fort Collins, Greeley, Windsor, and then we pulled in Evans and a couple other regional water providers like Fort Collins, Loveland. And we just talked about, are there ways that we can collaborate? Are there ways that we can work together? Again, I didn't mention my presentation. Our water treatment providers are the City of Loveland, Fort Collins Loveland Water District in Northwell, right? We don't have a water treatment plant. We contract with everybody. So when they have issues with water turbidity or, guess what? So do we, right? So we started working with them and talking about the bigger picture, talking about the hope that we're not in a fist fight every time with water, recognizing the scarcity. And I think protecting a little bit too and recognizing that northern Colorado water, we still have some, right? We still have some good ag. And who doesn't have water now? Like Denver, City of Castle Rock, right? Aurora, Arvada, and they're coming up north, right? We talk about a lot about Thornton and their pipeline. What do? They just look for the easiest place to get water, right? And they're trying to build the straw now, but they've got the water. So, you know, those conversations that I would say collectively as a group, we haven't done anything. I mean, truly, it's been 4 years and we're like, you know, do we agree on a mission statement? It's been that kind of group. But I think, the side conversations I've had with Greeley and Fort Collins and Loveland and Fort Collins Water and Northwell have been highly fruitful, right? We have 2 big raw water leases because of those conversations. I think that our work on Cobb Lake Regional Water Treatment Plant has jumped up tremendously based on those. So I think just, you know, somebody said, you know, it's hard to make friends when you need them, right? And so I think a lot of these regional water things, you're just making these friends and these relationships and identifying places and things you don't have to fight about. So they've been really good collectively. And I think that when I look at my friends like Severances and Eaton, right, we're looking at ways to help them out, you know, even though we're certainly not Greeley, who's got water until like the year 2200 and still buying water, right? So it just won't stop. But, you know, for us, I think there's still ways for us to help out our smaller neighbors as well. And it's just so, that's kind of, I don't know what you guys would say.
I guess I would agree. There's areas where we can't. It's our portfolio, it's our water rights, we have change cases, we have to compete. But I think it is an emerging trend, you know, started with the work 4 years ago, with regional cooperation. I think that, and I think we are finding win-wins, where 1 and 1 makes 3, and trying to take advantage of those. I think, as Shane also indicated, we need to circle the wagons a bit because our northern Colorado waters there's a target on. And to the extent that we have to compete with the Denver Metro, it's gonna add up the price, but there's also the issue of just future development of the region. And so I think there's another area where coordination in terms of defending those resources, you know, there's strength in numbers. So to speak.
Yeah, and you know, I was kind of thinking the same thing. We're in competition when it comes to a lot of things, but when it comes to things like emergency interconnects, you know, ensuring reliability during emergencies, you know, whatever that may be, I think that's really important to all of us is making sure that, you know, we have those redundancies that exist as a region, because as an economic powerhouse of the state, we do rely on each other quite a bit in keeping things operating. It's not good for anyone if a huge chunk of northern Colorado is out of water. So when it comes to the long-term planning and trying to, you know, shepherd growth within our boundaries, that's one thing. But when it comes to operating our systems, I think we're a lot more open to collaborate and you know, come up with engineered solutions.
Jane, I'm just curious, where your proposed water treatment plan is with Severance and.
Yeah, the public plant, so it's basically if you take Colorado Boulevard and you run north, and I'm trying to think of it in Scotland where like the treatment plant is, but it just, you know, if you can like align Colorado 13, it's called Cobb Lake.
Okay.
And so it's basically this pipeline will run straight through there. And I can say that for certain because it's on Weld County side, so we know that's locked down, right? So, sorry, anybody? No. So basically, we put our treatment plan as close as we could to that raw water source, so it'd be easier to treat.
Well, thank you all.
Hot day back.
Well, thanks again, and if you are sticking around for lunch, we'll follow up with some more questions. And we're gonna take lunch break. We are going until, yeah, we got it. 12 until our next.
I got you a lunch.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yes, so yes, I can show you.
Yeah. conservation manager for the city of Fort Collins. He spent the last 6 years developing and implementing programs, policies, and plans in underwater demand for efficiency and conservation. And now oversees a single water conservation professional focusing on this work. He's got over 15 years of work in local government. He's been a land use planner, sustainability coordinator, and public works director. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you. To go ahead, maybe.
Do I have a clicker or are you just?
So he's just finished
You're good.
downloading.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here with all you wonderful, water literate leaders in training. I'm gonna just. Well, I do think I'm gonna go to the next slide. Great. Okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you. I can sync this up. All right, can you guys see behind me, or would it be helpful if I move? You're fine. If I, you guys over here, is it fine? Okay, all right. So a little bit about Fort Collins Utilities. I think we just lost, oh, there it is. It's back. All right, let me know if it goes black back here. I'm working with these technical issues. So Fort Collins Utilities serves about 75% of the total population within the city. So you'll see we're that blue area to the north and south of us are other water providers, one of which I think you're going to hear from here in a minute, Fort Collins Local Water District. We have about 36,000 customer accounts. Our average treated water is about 22 million gallons a day. Peak is about 40 million gallons a day. So that's during the summertime when we're providing a lot of irrigation water as well. And then annually, it's about 8 billion gallons of treated water a year. And we also have award-winning taste. I think it's been a while since we won that award. I want to say it was in 2019, 2020. But that's in part why we have some really great industries in our area that rely on water, a lot of breweries.
Really?
Really, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about supply, and I'll be focusing more on the demand management side, given my role in water conservation. But for supply, we do have two sources, and on any given year, it's about 50% Cache-la-Poudre River water, and the other 50% is from Horsetooth, which is Colorado Big Thompson water, so West Slope water. We have, it's great to have those two sources, so we have some level of redundancy, but we do actually need both of those sources. So we couldn't fully provide all of our water demand from one source in a given year. We are able to kind of toggle back and forth depending on water quality and what's happening with certain situations within our system and climate impacts, but it is pretty important that we do always have those two sources. Some of our supply challenges are related to climate impacts, which create greater demands when you have hotter, drier conditions. It creates less supply when you're reliant on that snowpack for your supply. There are issues, as you probably all know, with the Colorado River Basin, which could potentially in the future impact our quota from Colorado Big Thompson, which is where the water and what the water, those Colorado Big Thompson water quota is stored in Horsetooth. The earlier runoff with climate impacts, which impact our ability to utilize that supply, especially when we don't have adequate storage to hold that water and use it for when we really need it. It also can result in more frequent water shortages, which in response results in water restrictions and can impact trees and other living infrastructure in our community. We have really good water rights, but we do lack storage, and I'm speaking specifically for the Poudre River system. So Joe Wright's our main storage facility on the Poudre River. And we are, obviously, as most of you know, looking at developing Halligan further to help with that issue. All right, so a little bit about what my team does. So I manage a group of 6 water conservation practitioners. They come from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have project managers, we have horticulturists, we have irrigation specialists, we have data analysts. It really takes
a diverse set of skills to address all things water conservation, indoor water use, outdoor water use. We're looking at all customer classes, so multifamily, commercial, single family, duplex. We have some irrigation only accounts, so it's a very, it requires a diverse skill set in order to be able to address a diverse range of issues. Because each of those customer classes has an indoor and an outdoor component, and we need to be prepared to be able to offer services or programs to support water conservation and efficiency across our entire service area. We have over 16 programs with measurable water savings. We offer many more services and work on policies and plans that are harder to equate water savings to. But we're always tracking and managing those programs that have measurable water savings and reporting out to those in the community, reporting out about those in the community each year. We have historically been very focused on providing education and various incentives and rebates. And what we're seeing now is that there might be a need to meet our future supply limitations and future demands to focus more on standards and codes and maybe other regulations. All right, so I'm going to share some stats, and I'm sorry, these are from 2022. 2023 has not ended yet, so we haven't done that analysis, so this might seem a little dated. And this 2023 will look very different, we're assuming, because of all the water we had, the moisture that we had throughout the irrigation season this last year. But for 2022, the curve on the left-hand side here, the bottom half is commercial use, which includes HOA water use. The top half is residential, which includes multifamily and single-family duplex. You're seeing the difference in water served, and this pie chart over here breaks that out as well. But you can see how there's this really traditional bell-shaped curve that you see in the west. Can anybody guess what the peak of that curve is related to? Probably all know it's outdoor irrigation, outdoor use. And you can see actually the 3-year average compared to 2022. If you remember what the weather was like in spring of 2022, it was hotter and drier earlier. And then you got some moisture later in the summer and the fall. And so that trend is pretty visible here when you look at the 3-year average in comparison to that 2022 year. Moving to the right, this pie chart. So 43% of our total annual use is used outdoors. We've broken that out so you can see the different percentages depending on the customer class. So the orange in this larger pie chart is commercial, and again, that includes the HOA common space, that's also irrigated. And you know, it's about half and half, a little heavier on the indoor. The BG stands for billion gallons. On the right-hand side is total residential. We've broken that pie chart out and split it up into single family and duplex combined. Now that's closer to 50-50 split annually between indoor and outdoor use for single family and duplex. Multifamily indoor and multifamily outdoor make out about a quarter of that pie. And you can see the split there is much different. There's a lot more water use indoor than there is outdoor. And that makes sense, right? If you have a big multifamily complex, there's going to be a lot of indoor use. You probably have some common area, but it's not going to be the same as the ratio between indoor use and outdoor use for a single family development. And then down here at the bottom, we have million gallons on the left-hand side, and then across the bottom axis, we've got years. And so you can see our estimated water savings from our programs that we evaluate each year. You can see the trends, how we built up from 2017, 18, 19, we dropped in 2022 because we weren't seeing as much participation in our programs. We weren't out in the community as much. We were seeing people not wanting us to, you know, come to their house and give an irrigation assessment or come inside their home and do direct install toilets and some of these other programs that we offer for good reason. And same with commercial businesses as well. A lot of commercial businesses were experiencing a lot of change and a lot of challenges, and you know, water conservation and efficiency probably wasn't top of mind. 2021, we started to climb back out of that. In 2022, we almost hit a record, which was back in 2019. So we're definitely seeing an upward trend, which will likely plateau without some changes being made to what we currently offer and do, within water conservation. All right, so this is, another way of looking at water savings, water use. We have, years down here at the bottom, going from 2000 to 2022. And we have, gallons per capita per day on this left-hand side. And so gallons per capita per day is total water use. So what leaves our treatment meter and goes into the community. So it includes commercial and residential. You have, commercial on the top and that hash bar, blue hash bar, and the bottom solid blue is residential. And this orange line going across the top is our service area population from 2000 to 2022. Our gallons per capita per day was 139 back in 2022. It's the same for what we experienced in 2021. Our 5-year gallons per capita per day average has been about 138. We would have needed to be at 138 in 2022 in order to meet what our current water efficiency plan goal is, which is 130 gallons per capita by 2030. So if we were, tracking along to meet that goal, it should be a drop of 1 GPCD, 1 gallon per capita per day each year to get us to that 2030, or to get us that 130 by 2030. So we aren't currently meeting that target, and we're recognizing that we'll likely have to do a lot more in order to be able to meet that target. And overall, our gallons per capita per day is down by 34% since 2000. So we've made significant progress. And some of that I think we attribute to our work in our service area, but there's other things that are happening, right? Technologies are improving with toilets and other fixtures. People are retrofitting things in their homes. New stuff that's being built, at least indoors, is more efficient. There are some things that are kind of naturally evolving that are helping with this.
Is that goal sustainable? I mean, you're talking about kind of the 130 GPDs or GPDs in a day. In 2030, it's certainly not sustainable. Like, there's only so much you can do if you evaluate the goal itself.
Yeah, it's a great comment. And I'll share a little bit about what we're doing to evaluate that goal a bit more. All right, so a little bit about demand management, some of the challenges we're experiencing. Growth is obviously one. We don't have the same growth pressures as some of the water providers, for instance, to the north of us in Elko. But we're still anticipating there being some pretty major redevelopment, especially in certain areas within our service area. Water right limitations that we currently have prohibit us from doing much with gray water. We recently passed some legislation or some code that allows us to allows development, new and existing, voluntarily to allow gray water for toilet flushing only. So we can't currently use gray water outdoors. We have leaks in our distribution system, just like everybody with a water distribution system. We're trying to evaluate that with the water loss audit that we do each year and better understand where there might be opportunities to upgrade infrastructure to help reduce those leaks, because they do add to the total water use, and they're so pretty significant. But it's also a pretty challenging thing to address. There are lots of opportunities outdoor. When I spoke and showed the slide earlier where 43% of our total water use is outdoors, that's arguably an easier area to target than indoor. We've made a lot of progress in indoor as it is, and seems to be like the outdoor areas maybe what we need to be focusing on and what we have been focusing on. But the challenges there are knowledge of landscapes. It can be a complicated process. The design aspects, the plant materials, hydrozones, irrigation, and it's all, somewhat technical and expensive. There's also the aesthetic piece. We don't want zero-scape, we want zero-scape. So we don't want people to just rock over their landscapes contribute to heat island effect and other, negative impacts. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen in order to balance out some of these things and make sure that we're getting what we actually want to see in the community that could actually provide some benefit. Yes.
Those two contrasting pictures, what did it, maybe what did it cost that homeowner to do that zero scale?
I don't have that number. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a great question though.
They did it themselves or.
But they never have to mow that front yard
Oh,
again. The value of that.
Yeah, no, it's great. It looks terrific.
Some initial financial analysis that we've done, we know it's obviously cheaper to put in to do this new versus to retrofit, right? Yeah, and the average single family yard, we were looking at it for, somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 square feet. For a new development, it was anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000 more than doing your typical kind of wall to wall curve. Yeah, so there is a cost impact to it. But as was mentioned, less mowing and less fertilizer and, other inputs that you have to purchase and put in that can also impact stormwater. There's benefits to pollinators and other native species that rely on native plants. But this is not maintenance free either. This requires weeding and other things, so.
Are there rebates that are given when people
Yes.
take up?
Yeah, we have a long-standing rebate program for single family residential, and for about 3 years now, we've had commercial and HOA multifamily rebates available,
So
so.
do you do stormwater credits or anything like that in addition, or is it just rebates?
Just rebates. I don't think we are looking at stormwater credits, yeah. Yep. And then trees are obviously a really important part of our living infrastructure, and when people take out their turf grass and put in xeric, native, non-native landscapes, oftentimes they're switching from sprays to drip, and the trees have been relying on drip, and so the trees have been relying on the sprays from the grass, and so making sure that we preserve our trees and our tree canopies because of the benefits they provide has been another aspect or element that we're needing to really consider as we move in this direction.
I do admire Fort Collins' tree canopy and evergreen forests, and I wonder if you have statistics showing that the cost benefits of trees.
I don't, but our forestry department definitely would, so I can follow back up on some of that information if that'd be helpful, yeah. And then there's the behavior piece. You can put in all the right irrigation infrastructure, plant material, mulch, all those things, but if you don't manage it correctly, you're not gonna see the water savings you were hoping for. So there's a big educational component there. I think most of our low-hanging fruit has been picked. We've had a water conservation program group since 1977. We've been doing this work for a long time, and we've been really focused on education and incentives. And trying to do things as cheap as possible for the biggest bang for the buck, water savings wise, and it's becoming harder to do that in that way. Rental housing is a big challenge for us. About 50% of our housing units, whether they're single family or multifamily, within our service area are rental units, and just the dynamic of that relationship between tenant and landlord and renter occupied housing. A lot of tenants aren't gonna have insight into their water use. It's gonna be the account owner that does. So if they're not the account owner, they don't have the information that they need to be able to access how much water they're using and track and monitor that. The account owner would, and they likely aren't gonna be paying the water bill either. And so it creates these kind of challenging dynamics to be able to really provide incentives that work for those types of housing. Affordable housing is a really big issue for Fort Collins, and so figuring out ways in which we can help be the solution instead of adding to the problem, instead of adding to the cost, is a high priority for us, and we have a lot of work to do in that space. Climate impacts, as I've been mentioning, hotter and drier means less supply, hotter and possibly drier means greater demands too, that the living infrastructure plants need more water as it's hotter out, and so we get this challenging dynamic between those two things with climate impacts. All right, I think this is my last slide. I just want to give a plug for the water efficiency plan update. We're in the process of